560. That was the number on the report card in my hand, and my hand would not stop shaking. The cutoff for the undergraduate program was 561. 1 point. Not one exam, not one section, not one bad morning. One single point sitting there in cheap gray ink like the universe had done the math specifically to see my face. Then the room tilted and I hit the floor, and when I opened my eyes again, I was still holding the card, but I was not the same person holding it, because I remembered a cubicle, I remembered a commute, I remembered dying somewhere with fluorescent lights in my eyes, and now I was 19 years old in a stranger's body, in a city called Yangzhou in the year 2056, and the stranger's whole life was pouring into my head like someone had emptied a filing cabinet over me. His name was Li Yuan, my name now. His father died 8 years ago in a beast tide. His mother, a military researcher, got eaten 5 years ago, and after that, the kid had exactly one plan for his life. Pass the physical, become a martial artist, and go kill monsters until something evened out. He trained like a lunatic. Best punch, 756 kilograms. He needed 900. Top speed, 24.12 meters per second. He needed 25. 6 months ago, he pushed so hard he collapsed on a gym floor and gave himself internal injuries that never properly healed, and now every time he strained, it felt like being pricked with needles from the inside out. So he was 1 point short of a school and about 100 kilograms short of a dream, and he had put his entire body in the ground to get there. Great. Wonderful. Love that for me. And then I noticed the thing on the desk. It was about the size of my palm. Pale, segmented, something between a caterpillar and a very unhappy shrimp, and it had been sitting there in a glass dish the whole time because the previous owner of my body had thought it was some kind of dead specimen. It was not dead, it was asleep, and it was starving, and the second my mind touched it, I understood two things at once. 1. It was mine, not a pet, not a tool, a part of me hanging off my soul like a second heart, and when it was hungry, I could feel it in my teeth. 2. It was an insect race larva. Now, in this world, that phrase does not mean anything to anybody. In my head, it meant a great deal, because I knew this world. I had read this world. Swallowed star, monsters, base cities, martial artists, and a whole universe above us pretending we did not exist. I knew the plot the way you know the layout of your childhood house in the dark. And the insect race was the thing the universe was afraid of. I checked its memory and immediately felt worse. The gene pool was empty, wiped. Whatever this larva had been, it had come out of something catastrophic with a cracked skull and one single unit left in the whole inheritance. Drone, congratulations, a worker ant. That is the entire cheat. A hungry worm with amnesia and a shovel. But it came with a rule, and the rule was the only beautiful thing in that apartment. The swarm steals. It eats a thing, and it learns to be that thing. Whatever it grows, I grow with it, because we are the same soul wearing two bodies. It gets stronger, I get stronger. Feed the worm, feed myself. I went to the fridge and got out a block of frozen pork, and the larva sucked it down like a toddler with a milkshake, and somewhere behind my sternum, the needles stopped for the first time in 6 months. Okay, I could work with this. So I did the math, because the math was the whole rest of my life. 100 kilograms of ordinary pork was worth 1 energy point. Monster meat, the cheap stuff, unicorn boar at over 100 yen a kilo, was worth double. The larva needed 5 or 6 points to become a drone. My bank account said 523,586 yuan and 23 fen. 2 dead parents, converted into a number with a decimal. I bought out an entire night market. 60 kilos of pork, 50 kilos of unicorn boar, 7,000 yuan gone in under an hour, and the vendors looked at me like a kid who had just been dumped and was planning something unhealthy with it. They were closer than they knew. Somebody knocked while I was still unpacking meat onto the floor of my apartment like a serial killer. He was square-faced and gray around the temples, and one sleeve of his jacket was folded up and pinned because there was no arm in it. Chen Hao, my father's sergeant. My father died shoving him out of the way of something in a beast tide, and Chen Hao walked out of that day with one arm and a debt he had been paying off for 8 years by raising a kid that was not his. He looked at the report card on the table. He did not pick it up. How much? 560. 1 point short. He was quiet for a while. Then he sighed, and that sigh had more in it than any speech he could have made. Here is what I knew about this man from the filing cabinet in my skull. 5,000 yuan a month at a military arsenal. Widower. A daughter, 15, a son, 11, and he had come across the city that night for exactly one reason, which was that he had done the arithmetic on a 19-year-old with 2 dead parents and 1 missing point, and he did not like the answer. He was not there to console me. He was there to make sure I was still there in the morning. I said something about it being fine. He nodded like he did not believe a word, and stayed anyway, and I let him, and I did not tell him that on the desk 2 rooms away, something was quietly eating 50 kilos of monster. By the third day, the larva had gone from palm-sized to arm-sized, and I had spent 30,000 yuan on 300 kilograms of unicorn boar, which is a sentence that would have gotten me sectioned in my old life. I also went back to the dojo of limits to test myself, and got humiliated. 740 kilograms. That was worse than the kid who used to live in this body. My mind knew 100 things about leverage and rotation that he never did, and my muscles knew none of them, and the gap between knowing and doing punched me in the mouth on a public machine with people watching. So I spent the whole day on power generation. Just that. Hips, spine, the order things fire in. By evening, the machine said 786 and my speed said 25.26, and I stopped hating the day. Then I picked a weapon, and I picked the hard one. There is a saying in this world: a month for a staff, a year for a knife, a lifetime for a spear. Everybody sensible picks the knife. I bought a replica of the Pojun 2, a spear, because a spear has reach, and because the strongest man on this planet uses one, and if I was going to spend a lifetime, I wanted it to be on the thing at the top of the list. That night, the larva stopped eating and started changing. It swelled into a pupa the length of my arm, then 1.5 meters, and the shell went hard and dark, and something inside it kept moving. When it cracked open, the thing that stood up in my living room was 2 meters tall and looked like an ant that had been redesigned by someone with a grudge. 300 pounds, a carapace that would stop small arms fire, strong enough to pick up several times its own weight without noticing. By this world's rating system, it was an H-class monster, a monster, in my apartment, standing there waiting to be told what to do, and the feedback rolled up the link into me like warm water, and another layer of those old injuries let go. So naturally, I asked the obvious question, which was, what next? The answer came back from that half-empty inheritance in a very calm way, the way an app tells you the download will take 9 hours. Drone to mother nest. 500 energy points. 500 points is 25 tons of pork, 6 or 700,000 yuan, or 12.5 tons of unicorn boar, which is 2 million. I looked at my bank balance. My bank balance looked back. Cool. Very cool. I went back to the testing hall a few days later and put up 910 kilograms and 27.1 meters per second, which cleared both bars, and I was feeling extremely good about myself right up until the nerve reaction test. They put you in a circle 3.6 meters across. Rubber bullets come at you from every direction for 60 seconds, and a red light flicks on at random, and you have to not get hit and not touch the light. It is the test that decides whether your body can keep up with your reflexes when something is actually trying to kill you. Hit 89 times, touched the red light 5 times, failed, and I knew exactly why, because I felt it. Halfway through a dodge, the old injuries locked me up. My body simply stopped taking orders for 1/4 of a second, and 1/4 of a second in that circle is a corpse. I went home in a mood. Chen Hao was waiting outside my door. He had a case with him, and he held it out with his one hand, and inside the case was a vial and a printed label, and the label said Human Body Cell Repair Agent. I knew what that was. I knew what it cost. 200,000 yuan through official channels and closer to 1 million on the black market, and it is only ever available inside the military, and it repairs exactly the kind of damage that had just cost me the test. This man earns 5,000 yuan a month. That is 3.5 years of not eating. Where did you get this? Been saving. Took about half a year. He said it the way you say the weather. And then, because I must have been making a face, he got annoyed at me. If you don't want it, who will? I bought it especially for you. He had also brought a lunchbox of braised unicorn boar, which is expensive meat, and I would bet the whole 500,000 in my account that he had never once eaten it himself. I took the vial. I slept for a solid day. When I woke up, my body pushed out a lot of black filth that I am not going to describe, and then I stood up in that apartment and moved, properly moved, for the first time since I had gotten here, and there were no needles anywhere. 932 kilograms, 27.5 meters per second. Nerve test, 58 hits, still a fail. Next attempt, 55 hits, no red light. Pass, advanced student. And then I stayed and drilled it down under 50 because passing is not the same as surviving, and I called Chen Hao to warn him. I'm taking the prospective martial artist assessment tomorrow. There was a long pause on that line. 2 weeks earlier, this kid had been an intermediate student with a broken body and no future, and I could hear him doing the arithmetic and getting an answer that made no sense. Tomorrow, he repeated. Tomorrow. The assessment was at Mingyu Community, which is where martial artists live, which means walls and 6 men with real guns at the gate. 9 of us showed up. One of them I recognized immediately, and my stomach did something complicated. Lean kid, black training uniform. Perfectly ordinary face, the kind you would not pick out of a crowd of 3. Xu Lei. If you have not been paying attention, in the book of this world, that is the main character. Not a main character, the one. Everything that happens on this planet for the next several decades happens because of him, and I was standing next to him in a line waiting to punch a machine, and he said hey, and I said hey, because we were classmates. We had literally sat in the same building for years. Neither of us had ever been anybody. The chief instructor was a man named Gao Yong, with hair like he had lost a fight with a pillow, who owned the dojo of limits, and beside him stood a district instructor called Lin Hui, who was extremely proud of being from Yi'an and made sure everyone knew. I hit 933, Shulei hit 1101. Yeah, there it is. There is your protagonist. Speed. He ran 28.6. I ran 27.6. A guy called Tao Jun scraped in at 25.1, which is the kind of number where the machine sighs. Then the nerve test, and I went in and came out with 50 hits and no red light, which is a pass and nothing more than a pass. You will be a prospective martial artist, Gao Yong said. Then Shulei went in and finished on 28 hits, and the room went quiet in a specific way, because 28 is not a pass. 28 is a grade of its own. I had barely cleared 50. He had nearly halved it, and Tao Jun passed by doing something I had never seen a human being do, which was to not dodge. He moved about one step in any direction, ever, the smallest possible amount that made the bullet miss, and he did it over and over with this bored economy, and Lin Hui shouted at him for it because apparently it is a bad habit that gets you killed. Personally, I filed it under things to steal. 4 of us passed. Me, Shulei, a guy named Guo Kai, Tao Jun, and then the silver-haired man looked at us. I had noticed him earlier and put him in the background, a man in a black robe standing behind Gao Yong, silver hair, saying nothing, captain of something. He looked along our little row, and Tao Jun's eyes went flat and empty, and Guo Kai's did the same, and both of them woke up a second later drenched in cold sweat with no idea why. He had walked through their heads like a man checking rooms in a house. The only reason he did not walk through mine is a twitch. At that exact moment, the drone shifted on the other end of our soul link. A tiny nothing of a shiver, a worker ant adjusting its footing in an apartment 40 kilometers away. It snapped me out of it, and I stood there smiling politely at a monster in a bathrobe while my heart tried to leave through my ribs. Psyker Master. That is what that is. A mind that reaches out and touches things directly. On this planet, that is the rarest and most terrifying kind of martial artist there is. Noted. Walking out of there, I did the thing I had been chewing on since I woke up in this body, which was the Shulei problem. Here is what I knew. Very soon, a very rich family was going to insult his father. He was going to lose his temper about it, get thrown in a cell, get stabbed in that cell, and wake up on the other side of nearly dying with a talent nobody on earth could match. That is his origin. That is the crack the light gets in through. And I could be standing there when it happened. I could be the helpful classmate, attach myself to the meteor early, ride it for 40 years, collect scraps. I thought about it for about a block and threw it out. Not because I am noble, because it is a bad trade. A man who owes you for standing near his worst day owes you exactly as much as he feels like owing you. A man who has bled next to you does not have to decide anything. Friendship forged in a fight beats a favor you engineered every time, and anyway, I had a worm in my apartment that ate monsters and got me stronger. I did not need to be anybody's sidekick. I would meet him properly later, on my terms, when I had something he wanted. Then I went and signed a contract that said I was aware the practical assessment on August 1st would take place in the wilderness, and that my own life and death were my responsibility. And I went to dinner at Chen Hao's. He took the day off to cook, which he never did. Watching a one-armed man run a kitchen is its own kind of lesson in leverage, and I did not offer to help because I had learned that offering was insulting. His daughter, Chen Ling, 15, oval-faced, in an apron, called me Brother Yuan and kept refilling my bowl without asking. His son, Zhaoming, 11, spent the meal executing a long-term operation against the snack cupboard and thought nobody could see him. Somewhere over the second dish, I mentioned that prospective martial artists get given a villa, martial artist district, guards, clean air, actual security. Move in with me. He put the ladle down. Only relatives can move in. How can you not be my relatives? Xiao Yuan. I say you are, so you are. He argued for a while. He lost, the way people lose when the argument is not about the rules. Also over that dinner, I learned the name of the only thing on this planet that lets a human body absorb energy from the universe itself. 5 hearts facing heaven. Earth has exactly one cultivation method. That is it. That is the whole library. I got home and sat down to do it, and for 19 days, nothing happened. 19 days. And I know for a fact that Shulei felt it on his first night, because that is what he is. Meanwhile, I went to the bank and took a 3 million yuan loan against the apartment and spent it. An A2Po Jun spear, 500,000. A combat suit. An off-road pickup with a mounted machine gun and 5,000 rounds, 500,000. A dirt bike, 100,000. A rifle, a quad rocket launcher, landmines because I am not proud, night vision, 2.1 million yuan, gone in a handful of clicks, and I remember thinking very clearly, if I do not come back, the loan is not my problem. On the 19th night, I stopped trying. That was it. That was the entire trick. I had been sitting there straining at the universe like a man trying to intimidate the ocean, and I finally got bored and let go, and the energy came in through the crown of my head and my palms and the soles of my feet like water finding a low place. 300 or 400 kilograms of raw strength just from that. 2,000 kilograms is where they start using the word genius. And on the desk, my drone had folded itself into a pupa with 650 points of energy stored inside it, which meant I was going into the wilderness. At the supply base, they take your registration and then somebody always asks the same question. Which squad? No squad. The clerk looked up. Behind me, a group of martial artists in matched gear turned around slowly, the way people do at a car crash. Are you out of your mind? Any random monster out there could kill you. They were called the Blood Wolf Squad, and within about 4 minutes they had opened a betting pool on how long I would last, not quietly either, out loud, with a whiteboard energy to it, taking money from strangers. So I found the one with the scar across his face who seemed to be holding the cash and put 10,000 yuan in his hand. On me, back alive in 5 days. He blinked. Odds are 1 to 5. I know what the odds are. That is the single best purchase I made that year, and I want you to remember it because we are coming back to it. My original plan had been the Villa District, an abandoned suburb about the right distance out. I had picked it off a database. Then I actually stood at the edge of it and counted, and there were 300 monsters in there, and I threw the plan in a ditch on the spot. A plan built out of a database by somebody who has never been outside is rubbish. Write that on my grave if this goes badly. I picked a strip of jungle instead, put the pupa down in a hollow, and immediately nearly lost everything to a black snake that came out of the leaf litter and decided my priceless, irreplaceable golden opportunity looked like lunch. I got there first. Barely. Then the pupa opened up into something that was no longer an animal. It was a mass of meat the size of a car, and it pulsed, and it kept pulsing, and out of its base came a purple film that spread over the ground and started digesting everything it touched. Grass, bark, bone, the snake, creep. That is what it is called, and that is what it does. The hatch takes 3 hours. 40 minutes in, a tiger mastiff walked into my clearing, 2 meters at the shoulder, 2,000 kilograms behind its charge. My first real fight, and I want to be honest about it. It was not stylish. It came in, and I put the spear where its chest was going to be, and it turned that into a shoulder, and its tail came around and nearly tore the weapon out of my hands, and for about 8 seconds, we were both just trying to make the other one stop existing. I won because of the stick. That is it. That is the whole reason. Its teeth needed to be here, and my spear worked from over there, and reach is the oldest advantage our entire species has. Everything humanity has ever built is a way of hitting something from further away than it can hit you. It went down, and at that exact moment behind me, the thing on the ground finished. 6 meters of flesh unfolded upward out of the earth in one motion, and kept going, and settled, and the pressure of it hit the back of my neck like standing under a cliff. Mother nest. Then the feedback came up the link, and it was not warm water this time. It was a fire hose. My brain filled with white noise. I heard something screaming and worked out too late that it was me, and I had exactly enough time left to give one order before the lights went out. Hatch drones. Protect me. Protect the nest. I woke up in the morning to 50 of them standing around me in a ring. Overnight, a 5-meter black-ringed snake had come in. I know that because there were pieces of it at the edge of the creep, being absorbed. I sat up. It was still dark under the canopy, and I could see everything. I put my hand on a tree and left a palm print in the wood without meaning to. And then I looked at the spear lying 6 meters away and thought about picking it up, and it came off the ground and slapped into my hand hard enough to sting. I stood there for a while, holding it. Psyker Master, Body, Advanced Warrior, Divine Thought, Intermediate General. For scale, when Shulei eventually awakens, he comes out of it with Intermediate Warrior and a Junior General's mind, and the whole planet loses its head about him, and rightly so. I had done it by feeding a worm, and the nest told me the ceiling of what I had built. A Tier 1 nest tops out at Advanced Warrior. To go further, it needed 5,000 energy points and its gene progress at 100%. Gene progress, because that is the actual game here. The swarm is not a factory that makes ants. The swarm is a plagiarist. It has one talent, and that talent is theft. Inside the nest, it grew a chamber. The chamber cost 1 drone and 100 energy. And when I fed a corpse into it, it played me that animal's entire life like a film, from the inside, start to finish. Then it took the genome apart layer by layer, like peeling an onion in slow motion. That was the moment I understood what I actually had. Not a pet army, a research department that breeds. The villa district was still sitting there with 300 monsters in it, so I went back with 50 drones and a spear whose head I had snapped off because I had realized I did not need to be holding it. I could fly the spearhead on its own, 20 meters out, a blade with no handle and no arm to block. It took 1 hour. That was not a battle. That was a demolition. Iron hair boars came in a herd, 40 of them, shoulder to shoulder, and I put the spearhead through the lead one's skull from the far side of the street, and the herd broke on my line like surf on a wall. And when it was over, the wounded drones crawled onto the creep, and the creep started fixing them, and I watched one of them regrow a leg that a boar had taken off at the joint. Regrow it, in front of me, in minutes. I stood in an abandoned suburb full of dead monsters, and I was not thinking about any of that. I was thinking about a folded pinned jacket sleeve. I asked the nest, very carefully, whether that could be done for a human. The answer was yes, with a condition. Analyze the target's genes first. Understand the blueprint, then you can put the missing piece back. I want to be clear about the order of events here, because it matters. Before I had a plan for the war, before I had a plan for the planet, before I had a plan for anything, I had that. Alright, item on the list, we will get to it. The nest could run 3 of those analysis chambers at once and no more, because it was thinking as hard as it could already. First subject in was the tiger mastiff, and 20 minutes and 15 energy later, I could hatch them myself. Intermediate beast soldiers, 2 meters at the shoulder, on tap. And I discovered a second use for all that computing power completely by accident, which turned out to be worth more than the army. I was practicing spear forms, and the nest was watching me through the link, and it started marking things, not opinions, data, left obliques firing 11% late, rear foot rotating before the hip, 3 moves generating force in the wrong order, 5 moves distorted. My spear work went from not even solid to proficient in under a day. Nobody on Earth has that. Nobody on Earth has ever had that. Everyone else on this planet learns to fight by having a person watch them and say, try it again. I had a 6-meter organic supercomputer telling me which specific muscle was lying to me. I also went and got my mother's textbooks out of storage. Genetic engineering, cell engineering, bioinformatics. She was a military researcher and she left behind a shelf, and her son had never opened it. And I sat in that clearing at night with a headlamp reading a dead woman's course books while 100 insects patrolled the dark. Because here is the thing about a swarm with an empty inheritance. It has no idea how to be great. It can only copy what it eats, unless somebody teaches it. The plan I drew up that night went like this. Move southeast to 0203 County, which used to be called Suzhou. From there to Taihu Lake. From the lake down the Yangtze. And from the Yangtze into the sea. Because the sea is where the real population is, and everything I had seen so far was the shallow end. There was one place I crossed off before I started, and that was County 0201. Xu Lei goes to 0201. He goes there with the Firehammer squad, he nearly dies there, and he comes out of it a different man. Fine. Good luck to him. But contact with the protagonist means being inside the story, and being inside the story means somebody eventually asks what exactly you are. So I went the other way, and I went at night, riding a tiger mastiff. I want to spend a second on that because I did not expect it to feel like anything. It is 1.5 meters at the shoulder. It runs like a wolf that has been overfunded, and sitting on its back at 40 kilometers an hour through a dead suburb with your own eyes seeing in the dark is genuinely the most fun I had had since I got to this world. I had a spear across my knees, and 100 insects fanned out through the ruins ahead of me, feeding me their eyes. 2 hours later, one of those eyes went out. Not died. Went out, mid-step, in a way that made no sense. I turned the whole scouting line around and looked at the spot through the next drone along, and what I saw was a flower. A big one. 2 meters of pale petals in the middle of an intersection, glowing very slightly, extremely beautiful. It had my scout's head inside it and was folding the rest of him in after it. I did not go and fight the flower. I marked it, routed everything around it, and made a note that in this world, pretty means poisonous. Somewhere in the same hour, I stopped thinking of the wilderness as a place with monsters in it and started thinking of it as a monster with places in it. The first real fight of that march was a herd of unicorn boars. 20 of them, 3 at advanced level, coming through a collapsed shopping street in a line. I opened with the spearhead, and I got a very unpleasant surprise. The A2 is a 200,000 yuan military weapon. I put it into an advanced boar's skull at full telekinetic speed, and the skull won. The head of my spear cracked. Not the boar. The spear. So I improvised, and the improvisation was better than the plan. Their horns, that is what they are famous for, that is what they are named for, and they are harder than my expensive weapon. So I let the drones tank the charge, and I pulled a dozen horns off the ones already dead, and I threw those instead. Free ammunition, sharpened by evolution, delivered by the enemy. By the end of that street, I had 20 horns in the air at once, and a firm new opinion about weapon procurement, which is that the wilderness is a hardware store, and everything in it is on sale. The next morning, I nearly lost my temper for the first time since I woke up in this body. I had a scouting squad about an hour out from my position, 11 tiger mastiffs, and something ambushed them. A double-tailed tiger cat, which is an elementary beast general, backed by about a dozen ordinary tiger cats. They did not kill my squad, they played with it. That is the correct word, and I am not being dramatic. They would let a mastiff break the ring and run 20 meters and then cut it off and bring it back. They took turns. 2 tails, striped, moving like liquid, and every time one of mine went down, the cat would stop and wait for it to get up so it could do it again. And I was an hour away, an entire hour, watching it through their eyes, feeling every single one of them, unable to close the distance any faster than I already was. Look, my insects die. They die constantly. They are born to die, thousands of them, and I burn them like fuel and I sleep fine. Death is in the contract. Being toyed with is not in the contract. I came in from the flank at a full run and I did not shout anything because that is theater. I threw 20-odd unicorn horns and the nest calculated every arc and I did not throw a single one of them at the boss. I killed the ordinary cats. All of them, systematically, from the outside in, while the double-tailed ones screamed at me and could not decide whether to charge. Then it was alone in an intersection with a man and 100 of my things coming up the street, and I put 2 horns through its hind legs and 1 through its shoulder, and I stopped. I could have finished it. I let the swarm do it instead, and I let it take a while. It cost me 15 tiger mastiffs and an entire scout squad. What I got back was a pile of claws, teeth, and a tail tendon that I already knew were worth tens of millions of yuan at any appraisal desk in the country, and something I valued more, which was a very clear understanding of my own limits. I could not be everywhere. An hour was too long. I needed either faster units or more nests, and the answer was obviously more nests. Which brings us to the parking garage. 0203 County is enormous and it is full. I stood on a rooftop at the edge of it for half an hour and counted 5 beast generals without trying, including a high beast general mang ox the size of a delivery truck. Underneath all that, there were hundreds of thousands of ordinary monsters. I did not fight any of them. I picked my way in along the routes my scouts had mapped, keeping buildings between me and everything with eyes, and I found an underground parking garage with 3 levels and 1 collapsed ramp, occupied by several hundred black-haired rats. Rats are not a challenge. Rats are a chore. 2 hours of chore later, I had an empty concrete box under a city, and I dug a pit in the middle of the lowest level, and I put down mother nest number 2. And the moment it came up, both nests linked, and everything one of them knew, the other one knew. That is when this stopped being an army and started being an organization. Tiger Mastiff, Iron Hair Boar, Shadow Cat, Line, Tank, Assassin. Hatched from 2 locations at once, in a city with hundreds of thousands of targets in it, and no human being within 100 kilometers. Next problem. I had nothing that flew. So I went and stood on a roof in the open, in daylight, alone, which is a thing you are told never to do, and I waited to be noticed by a gray cloud finch. They came, hundreds of them, in a spiral the way birds do. I had 30 horns in the air before the first one was in range, and I dropped it out of the sky, and then the flock committed, and the thing about diving birds is that they all arrive on the same line. Shadow cats came up out of the stairwell behind me and caught them in the air like cats catching moths, which is a sentence I did not expect to write. Halfway through that fight, I got angry at one particular bird and pushed at it with my mind. Not a technique, just a shove. And it stopped. It hung there in the air, and something in my head clicked into it. And then it was mine. Not tamed, not obedient. Mine, on the network, another node, as much a part of the swarm as anything I had hatched. I sat down on that roof and worked out what had happened. If I beat a monster's mind down far enough, I could pour myself into the gap, and the swarm's talent would do the rest. Infection. I did not have to grow every soldier from scratch. I could take them. I tested it on a lion mastiff about 10 minutes later and pushed too hard and killed it outright, which taught me the other half of the lesson. This is a scalpel, not a hammer, and it costs me something every time, but it also gave me my cover story, right there on the roof, free of charge. Because how does a man have a private army of monsters without anybody asking about mother nests? He is a beast tamer. Obviously. There are beast tamers in this world. There are not many, and the good ones manage 1 monster, maybe 2, and everybody thinks they are very impressive. I decided to become an extremely impressive beast tamer. 2 days after that, my swarm fought its first real battle without me in it. There was a wild beast general tiger mastiff running a pack of about 500 on the north side of the county, and it came from my nest, and I stayed exactly where I was and watched. I had 1,000 tiger mastiffs, 200 iron hair boars, 200 shadow cats, and 100 birds. The birds went first and took the sky away. The boars met the charge head-on and stopped it dead, which is the entire reason boars exist. The mastiffs went around both flanks. And at the end of it, when their general was still standing and still swinging, a shadow cat came off a wall behind its head and took one of its eyes out, and it went down in the street without me lifting a finger. 2,000 units, growing by thousands a day. I did not feel triumphant. I felt like a man who has just realized his houseplant is now load-bearing. I went home on day 11. Now, the bet was 5 days. I walked into the supply base with a truck full of parts, and every single person in that hall turned around, and somebody near the back said, out loud, in a voice that carried, "This kid actually came back?" The HR Alliance appraisal desk did it in public because they always do it in public because the crowd is the point. The appraiser was one of those men who has developed a slow, bored way of handling merchandise specifically so he can enjoy the moment when it stops being boring. 30 advanced-grade unicorn horns, 240,000. He was still bored. Then the double-tailed tiger cat materials went on the counter, and he stopped being bored. 11 million. The hall noise changed pitch. And then I put down the Beast General Tiger Mastiff. 10 million. 21.24 million yuan. 11 days. One person. The Blood Wolf squad captain came over, Ming Jai, one eye, bald head, the kind of man who looks like he has been broken and reassembled at least twice, and he did not make excuses, which I respected. He handed me a card with 1 million yuan on it. 50,000's your winnings. The rest is an apology. You could just apologize. I could. This is better. Fair enough. Then he asked the question everybody in that hall was thinking, and he asked it quietly because he actually wanted the answer. You really hunted these alone? And I looked at him, and I thought about the 2 mother nests sitting under a dead city breeding 1,000 things an hour, and I said, hey, what do you think? I did not lie once. I want that on the record. I never once lied. Between then and the assessment, I did 2 things. The first was that I read my mother's books, properly, cover to cover, with the mother nest running alongside me like a study partner that never gets tired and has perfect recall. Genetic engineering, cell engineering, bioinformatics. Concepts I had genuinely never encountered in my old life, on a planet where this stuff is decades behind where I remembered it, and I was absorbing it about 40 times faster than a human being should be able to. I was not doing it for fun. I was doing it because a swarm with no inheritance has no ceiling and no floor. It cannot invent. It can only steal and remix. Unless the man attached to it learns to write the blueprints himself. The second thing I did was buy 12 throwing knives, August 1st, over 1,000 candidates in a square, all of them holding one weapon, because that is what you do. I had a spear on my back and 12 knives on a belt, and I got some looks for it. Gao Yong ran the briefing, and partway through it, he stopped and found me in the crowd and asked, in front of everybody, in a voice that was not a normal briefing voice, "You went into the wilderness alone. Dozens of advanced beast soldiers and 2 beast generals." Every head in the square came around. Yes. The square erupted, and Gao Yong just stood there looking at me with an expression I would come to know very well over the next few months, which is the expression of a professional realizing he has been standing next to something and calling it a student. The practical assessment took place in a whole town, sealed, cleared of humans, stocked with monsters, cameras on every corner, and a watchroom full of instructors and officers and recruiters, and 1,000 candidates dropped in at dusk with one night to prove something. Most people go in and try to kill 3 or 4 things without dying. I would like to explain what I did, but honestly, it is easier to describe what the watchroom did. First 30 minutes, I killed a tiger mastiff with one thrown knife from a rooftop 2 streets away, and they made a note. 90 minutes in, I put all 12 knives into the air at once over a street packed with iron hair boars and cleared the entire street in a single pass, and somebody in that room said, out loud, into a live recording, "An elementary psyker master cannot control 12 knives like that." Because he is right. He is completely right. 12 is not a number, and elementary anything does. Then a little later, Gao Yong swore, which the microphones also caught, because he had just recognized that the candidate on screen 4 had been in his own testing hall 2 weeks ago, and nobody had signed him. Around 3 in the morning, I got bored of walking and turned the telekinesis on my own boots and flew, which is not a thing candidates do. And then I landed in front of a shadow cat and put my hand out and openly and obviously tamed it on camera. Beast tamer. Just a beast tamer, everybody. Nothing to see. And at dawn, I walked out of the town gate on foot with 12 monsters following me in a loose crowd like extremely ugly ducklings. The gate crew did not know what to do. Half the watchroom was standing up. I stopped, held up my hand, and snapped my fingers. All 12 dropped where they stood, dead, simultaneously, no sound. Then the knives came off my belt on their own and went down the line, cutting the ears off for the count, and came back, and I kept walking. Final tally, 226 monsters. More than any other candidate that night, by a distance that made the second place look like a rounding error. The second place, incidentally, was Xu Lei, doing that beautiful, economical, microscopic movement thing of his, killing more efficiently than anyone in the field, and getting completely buried by a man snapping his fingers on camera. Sorry, buddy. Genuinely. Your turn comes. He found me by the water station outside the assessment gate afterward, while the officials were still arguing about the tally. He did not look angry. That is the thing about Shulei that people underestimate for the next 40 years. He looked like a man doing arithmetic. 226, he said. Yeah. I got 61 and I thought that was going to be the story of the year. He drank some water. 12 knives at once. 12. An elementary psycher master controls 2, 3, if he is famous. I did not answer that, and he did not push it, and we stood there in the morning sun for a bit while 1,000 exhausted teenagers filed past us. Then he said the thing that told me exactly who I was dealing with. You went into the wilderness alone with no squad and came back with 2 beast generals. That was 3 weeks ago. He turned the bottle over in his hands. So either you were hiding something in school for 4 years, which I do not believe, or something happened to you in July. Something happened to me in July. Yeah, he nodded slowly, like a man filing a receipt. Something happened to me in July too. That is the whole conversation. 30 seconds. He did not ask me what it was, and I did not ask him what his was, and I want to note that this is the only person on earth who ever looked at what I was doing and went straight to the correct question without being told. Then he shook my hand and went to find his squad, and I went to be sold at auction. I got to the reception area, and there were 4 groups waiting for me, and none of them were pretending to be casual. The Dojo of Limits went first. 100 million yen, plus manuals worth 300 million. The Thunder Marshal Hall doubled it before Gao Yong had finished his sentence. 200 million, plus manuals worth 500 million. The military went third, and they did not lead with money. They led with a rank, Colonel, Special Forces Attachment, 100 million on top. And then the HR Alliance representative said 1 billion yuan, and the room went quiet, because that is not a recruitment offer. That is a statement about the world. 4 powers, 1 19-year-old, and every number on the table was bigger than everything my parents had earned in their entire lives combined. I was extremely calm about it, not because I am cool, because I had a mother nest under a city that was going to hit tier 2 inside 10 days, and I already knew what that made me, and none of these people were bidding on what I actually was. They were bidding on a very good freshman. They put me in a reception room with all 4 of them at once, which was a mistake on their part because it meant nobody could quietly outbid anybody. The HR Alliance man opened his mouth. I did not let him finish. I'm not interested in the money. That is a very effective sentence in a room where everybody has come to spend money. It is like pulling the tablecloth. My mother was a military researcher, I said. Monster biology, genetics. I want access to that. Papers, samples, labs, the actual work, not a tour. The military man in the room was a major general named Ma Jian, commander of the Northern Military Region, and he did not have to think about it for even 1 second because the military is the only one of those 4 groups that owns any of it. So it was the military. Colonel's rank, 100 million yuan, a full set of manuals, and enrollment in the martial artist special class at Jiangnan First Military Academy with no duties for 4 years. The Dojo of Limits man nearly came out of his chair. That is a waste. That is an absolute waste. With your talent, I could get you a place in the God of War preparatory camp. Do you understand what that is? Do you understand how many people on this planet ever see the inside of it? Thunder Marshal Hall said something similar, louder, and I sat there and nodded politely and did the arithmetic. In 10 days, my nest goes to tier 2. When it does, the feedback alone puts me at intermediate God of War, without 1 hour inside anybody's preparatory camp. There is no version of this conversation where I can say that out loud, so I signed with the army for the library. The one thing I will admit I enjoyed privately, walking out of there, I had just been enrolled in a university. Shulei fainted at the entrance exam over the math. I know, small victories. Let me have it. Then I got home, opened the military intranet for the first time, and had all my joy surgically removed. Rank, Colonel. Merit points, 0. Merit is the real currency in there, and here is how you earn it. 1 point per beast soldier, 100 per beast general, 10,000 for a lord level, 1 million for a king level. And here is what things cost. The spear art at the top of the list is called World Destruction. It is Long's, as in, the strongest human being alive wrote it himself, and it is the single best attack art on Earth. And it works by teaching your body to release layers of force it has been hiding from you your whole life. Level 1 gets you 180% of your normal output. Level 2, 270. Then 360. It keeps going, all the way up to 630 at the top. All 6 levels, 100 billion yuan. I had 100 million, so I bought level 1, which is 1% of the art, for 100% of my money. Then I found the other thing I actually needed, which is a book called Fundamentals of Spiritual. It is the Bible for Psyker Masters, and there is nothing else like it on Earth. And in the original story, Shulei has to trade Long himself to get a look at it. Object Control, Tier 1, 200 million. I did not have 200 million anymore. I had a spare 100 million lying around from selling monster parts, and I spent it on that instead, and then I went shopping for weapons and discovered that a 9 series short spear costs more than an apartment. I bought one 9 series and 10 8 series, 75 million. A 7 series spear, 40 million. I walked into that store with 120 million yuan and walked out with 12 million and a shopping bag, and I paid off the house loan with a chunk of what was left, and I want to record for posterity the exact thought I had sitting in the empty account screen afterward. Money is never enough. Remember that. It is going to keep being true at every single scale for the rest of this story, and it never stops being funny. The one thing I did with actual pleasure that week was the truck. A military transport in my old block on a weekday in front of everybody. Chen Hao came down with a box of kitchen things in his one hand, and half the building came out to watch, and the neighborhood aunties did what neighborhood aunties do, which is narrate. Chen Hao raised those 2 kids alone, and he looked after Xiao Yuan all those years, and Xiao Yuan didn't forget him. That last one got repeated a lot, and Chen Hao went red to the ears and pretended to be very busy with the box. He had also that same week been promoted to manager at the Arsenal, which I did not arrange and which absolutely happened because of who his nephew had suddenly become, and he knew that, and we both agreed silently never to mention it. Villa 0921, Shengxi Jiangnan. 3 floors and a basement, 800 square meters, inside a military martial artist compound with a wall and a gate and clean air. And here is a small thing I did on purpose that nobody noticed. I could have taken a villa in the base city, bigger, safer, more prestigious. I took Yangzhou because Yangzhou is where his job is, and where his street is, and where his kid's school is, and a man who has spent 8 years holding a life together with one arm should not have to start his life over as a favor to me. Ling Ling found the swimming pool and screamed. Zhao Ming found the home cinema and screamed louder. I found the training room and stayed in it. And that night I stood in the doorway of the living room and looked at the empty sleeve pinned to my uncle's shoulder, and I did the accounting. There is a thing in this world called water of life. It regrows limbs. It costs 30 billion yuan a dose, and there are people alive right now who are missing pieces of themselves because 30 billion is not a number a human being can reach. 30 billion, or a swarm that can already regrow a drone's leg on a mat of purple slime in a parking garage. And it was not just him. That is what got me. Every single year in this world there is a beast tide, and every tide takes arms and legs off ordinary soldiers who are not martial artists and cannot run, and half the men on the block I grew up on look like my uncle. I did not say anything about it out loud for months. I just moved it to the top of a list. What I did instead was train, and I want to be honest about how unfair the training was. There is a Psyker Master's manual called the Heavenly God Catalog. 99 illustrations, each one a step in controlling more objects with more precision, and the strongest Psyker Master on Earth had gotten to number 18. I cleared the first 6 the way you clear the tutorial in a game you have already played. By the end of that week, I could hold 16 short spears in the air at once and move all of them independently. For scale, Xu Lei at High God of War level, with the complete manual, manages 6 throwing knives, and that is considered remarkable. And the spear art was worse, in the sense of better. I would run through world destruction and the nest would grade it in real time. 3 moves generating force in the wrong sequence. 5 moves distorted. Second run, 1 and 3. Third run, clean. I learned all 21 movements of level 1 in a few days. Not learned in the sense of memorized. Learned in the sense of my body doing them correctly under load. Nobody on Earth trains like that. Nobody on Earth can. Meanwhile, the swarm went past 10,000 units, and I retired the iron hair boar and replaced it with the unicorn boar, because same energy cost, better animal, and the gene progress on my tier 1 nest crawled up to 91%. And I marked a date on the calendar for the end of September, which was Ruins number 9. Anyone who has read the story knows what is in Ruin 9. A black god suit, an optical brain, a Duntian shuttle. It is where Xu Lei gets the equipment that carries him for the next 20 years. I intended to be there first. Before any of that I had to clean up, so I went back to the villa district and burned my first nest. That was stranger than I expected. You give the order and the structures simply stop holding themselves together. All that architecture collapses into black liquid and soaks away. Then I poured gasoline over the creep myself and lit it and stood there watching the purple film curl and blacken because military patrols were sweeping this area now and I wanted them to find a burned suburb and nothing else. Down at 0203 meanwhile, I had a problem with a cow. Advanced Beast General Mang Ox, 3 meters at the shoulder, the local overlord, and unlike everything else in that county, it was smart. It had been raiding my perimeter for days, and it never once let itself get surrounded. It hit an outlying group, killed 20 or 30 of mine, and left before the encirclement closed, every time. and through the link I could feel what it had noticed, because prey that thinks is the worst kind. It had worked out that the strange new monsters kept multiplying no matter how many it killed, and it had noticed the other thing, which is that some of the animals fighting for them were its own kind, so it decided to kill one more batch and then leave the county for good. I met it in a collapsed intersection with 16 spears floating behind me. It broke the sound barrier dodging. I want to be clear that a 3-meter cow going supersonic in a residential street is one of the most upsetting things I have ever watched. 7 of my spears caught it anyway, went through, and pinned it to the road. It looked up at me while it was going out, and I felt the last thought it had. A human psyker master. With those monsters. Yeah. Sorry. 2 days later, the nest hit 100%, and I gave the order. Tier 2 took 6 hours. When it was done, the thing standing in that parking garage was 12 meters tall and had architecture, and the feedback that came up the link was not a fire hose this time, it was a wave. Body, intermediate warrior, punch over 20,000 kilograms, divine thought, god of war. There are roughly 3,000 god of war on the entire planet Earth, 7 billion people, 3,000. I got it by upgrading a building. The nest could now push out 50 larvae every 5 minutes, which is 7,200 a day, and it could hatch 6 different units at Beast General grade: Tiger Mastiff, Lion Mastiff, a heavy shock unit, double-tailed tiger cat, golden vulture, mang ox. Yes, that mang ox. I had analyzed it about 90 minutes after killing it. It spent a week being the smartest monster in the county, and now it was a product line. There was one thing I would not let the nest do, and it kept asking: the creep. Unchained, that purple film eats outward at a rate that would have covered the entire county in days and the province inside a month. It would also have shown up on human satellites like somebody had spilled ink on a photograph, and there would have been a national emergency inside a week. So I kept it locked inside a concrete box under a dead city, feeding on corpses I dragged to it, and I sat there at night doing something that felt insane at the time and turned out to be the most important idea I had that year. I started designing camouflage, not for the insects, for the ground. If I could splice plant genes into the creep, it could grow ordinary-looking vegetation on top of itself. Grass, weeds, flowers nobody looks twice at. And if those plants photosynthesized, the creep could feed the nests on sunlight instead of meat, which means a swarm that does not have to hunt to grow. I could not do it yet. My genetics was somewhere around undergraduate. I wrote it down anyway. And I sent golden vultures out carrying drones to found 3 branch nests, one in a jungle cave, one in City 0237, one in a town called 0209, and I went back to reading, and while I was reading, one of my tiger mastiffs went insane in the street. That is what it looked like. It had been in a bad fight, and afterward it ate a pile of unicorn boar corpses, and then it started screaming, and its skin split and its bones moved. I had seen this twice before, and both times it ended badly. One mastiff had grown a lion mastiff's head out of its shoulder and then come apart into a puddle. A shadow cat had produced 2 tails and 6 legs and collapsed under its own weight. This one did not come apart. It stood up 3 meters at the shoulder with a horn coming out of its skull and unicorn boar armor over a tiger mastiff's frame, and it was a beast general on the spot, without a chamber, without energy, without me. I threw a freshly hatched beast general at it as a test, and it ended that fight in 1 movement. I threw 2 at it, same result. The nest copied its blueprint that afternoon. 600 energy instead of 500, for a unit that was worth 3 of the old ones. And that was when the actual rule of my cheat finally landed on me. I had been thinking of the swarm as a printer. It is not a printer. It is a species, and species do a thing when you throw them into a meat grinder, which is that the survivors come out different. The numbers on that county at the time, 500,000 monsters, over 200 beast generals at the start. My swarm had killed 80,000 of them, including 60-plus beast generals, and lost 5,863 units doing it. War is not something the Zergs survive. War is how they upgrade, which was a lovely thought right up until the satellite alarm went off. Because you cannot kill 80,000 monsters in one county without somebody noticing that a county has stopped having monsters in it. The military's read on it was the obvious one. Either a lord-level monster had been born in there and was eating everything, or a beast tide was building. General Ma Jian called me personally, and I took the call standing on a rooftop 3 kilometers from my nest because there is a camera on those calls, and I was not about to have 12 meters of pyramid in the background. There's been a mass die-off in 0203 County. Tens of thousands. We're moving assets. Ah, I said. That might be me. Pause. That might be you. I've been training. I've killed a few thousand beast soldiers out here and 30-something beast generals. There is a specific quality of silence a 2-star general produces when a 19-year-old says that on an open line. Be careful, he said eventually, which I thought was very restrained of him. I said I would. and I moved the swarm's center of gravity to City 0237 that night, and I sat down and tried to do gene editing with my own hands for the first time. I took a tiger mastiff blueprint and I made one deliberate change to it. The entire life structure collapsed. Not the animal, the blueprint. It fell apart in the chamber like a house of cards in a wind tunnel, and the nest gave me the equivalent of a shrug. Okay. Fine. At most, I am a second-year undergraduate in a field where the textbook is a species. Back to the books. City 0237 is where I met my first Lord-level monster, and it met me by trying to eat me at 4 times the speed of sound. A black-crowned golden eagle, 30 meters of wingspan, feathers harder than diamond, which is a phrase I had read and filed under exaggeration, until one came off a stoop at me out of a clear sky, and the air itself made a sound I felt in my back teeth. Lord-level. That is the tier above Beast General, and the gap between them is not a step, it is a floor. I could have run. I was faster in a straight line at that point. Barely. Instead, I did something I want to recommend to everybody, which is, I made it feel clever. I threw 6 spears at it. Only 6, and I threw them at a deliberately lazy Mach 2, which for that bird is the speed of a thrown pillow. It slapped them aside and its whole body language changed. It stopped circling. It came in. At about 400 meters, all 6 spears turned around behind it, and every one of them went past Mach 6. They went through its wings. It still killed the golden vulture I was standing on. That is the part I want to keep in, because it is the part that keeps you honest. It came through a shredded wing and a spear in its chest, and it took my ride out from under me at 800 meters, and I had to kick off a falling bird and finish the fight in open air with nothing under my feet. 11 spears in the end. I pinned it to a collapsed apartment block like a specimen, wings out, still snapping at me. Submit, I said, or die. It told me, in the way those things do, exactly where I could put that, so I put a spear through its organs while it watched, and while it was still processing that, I poured my mind into it through the gap. The link took. Then I had it carried, very carefully, all the way back to the creep, and I healed it. I want to be clear about the sequence. I broke it, and then I fixed it, and it understood both halves, and after that, we had no further disagreements. It also came with an estate. That is the thing about Lord-level monsters. They own territory, and everything in that territory belongs to whoever the eagle belongs to. So with one bird, I acquired 2 high warrior level eagles, 50-odd warrior level, and several thousand beast soldiers, all of whom simply changed employers. Cost of this method, 1 enslavement per day, maximum, and afterward my head feels like a squeezed sponge. It is not a machine gun. It is a very expensive, very slow, very good investment. And I would have kept doing it all week, except that I ran out of spears. I need to explain how absurd this had become. My mind could now hold and drive 20 short spears at once. I owned 11. My growth had outrun the national economy's ability to sell me hardware. I had 3 billion yuan worth of Beast General materials in storage from over 60 kills, and the 3rd level of world destruction costs 5 billion, and I sat there on a rooftop on the 16th of August doing arithmetic like a man planning a wedding. Money is never enough. Also, I was due to report to the military academy on the 20th, which is the kind of detail that makes this whole period sound stupid when you say it out loud. Colonel, God of War, freshman. Then my combat watch went off. Military distress signal, squad level, special mission designation, which in that system means there is a non-combatant aboard, and the tag said surrounded. I looked at the coordinates. It was close. I had scouts on it inside 4 minutes, and what the scouts showed me changed the shape of my afternoon completely. There was a Chinese special operations squad pinned in a half-collapsed office building, 6 people, one of them carrying an old man. There were maybe 2,000 monsters converging on that building, which is a lot, but not unusual. And there was a second squad. 8 men, mostly foreign, in unmarked high-grade gear, moving parallel to the monsters about 600 meters out, and they were not fighting them. They were herding them, firing over them, driving them, shaping the crowd like sheepdogs, aiming a beast tide the way you aim a hose. I sat on a water tower and watched 2 men on a roof direct that, and I got their faces. One was bald, heavy through the shoulders, and my scouts brought me his name off his squad's chatter within a minute, because these people were not being careful. Jackson, Belena's family. The Belenas are HR Alliance royalty, and Jackson is the one they send when a thing has to happen and nobody must be able to prove it happened. Beside him was a man called Hiroshi Tanaka with a very good rifle, and they talked out loud because they thought there was nobody within 30 kilometers who mattered. He extracted a self-healing factor out of monster tissue, Jackson said, nearly as good as water of life, and cheap. How cheap? Mass production cheap, limb regeneration for anyone. Furuta whistled. We offered him 10 billion. He said no. If he succeeds, it costs the Alliance $1 trillion. A shrug. So he doesn't succeed. I would like to say I had a complicated reaction to that. I did not. Something in my chest went very quiet and very cold and stayed that way for the next 20 minutes. Down in the building, the squad were doing the things soldiers do when the math is finished. The captain was called Sun Wei, senior martial artist, Falcon Special Operations. 2 meters of him was a man named Ding Li carrying a heavy machine gun like a handbag. 3 others, Fan Cheng, Heibo, Wei Yang, and the 6th, Chen Hua, was carrying a gray-haired old man on his back through a stairwell. The old man was Professor Qian Guangming, chief researcher, Key Laboratory of Biotherapy, Jiangnan 1st Military Academy. 2 large-caliber shots came in from a very long way out. Sun Wei batted the first one out of the air, which I still think about. The second one took Chen Hua's right arm off at the shoulder. And here's the thing I did not expect. The thing that made me stop being cold and start being angry. He went down, and on the way down, he twisted, and he put himself between the professor and the next shot. They got into a collapsing lobby. Fanching and Ding Li started rigging a charge to cover a retreat that was not going to work. Chen Hua was propped against a pillar, gray, and he said the only thing left to say, "I can't walk. Avenge us." And then, over all of it, an eagle screamed. Somebody in that lobby said, "It's over. That's a Lord-level black-crowned golden eagle." It came down in the street outside and spread 30 meters of wings, and every monster in that intersection scattered like pigeons. The HR Alliance shooters on the roof stopped shooting and left. Immediately. Both of them. No discussion. Because a Lord-level bird is not something 2 God of War can handle, and they had already decided the monsters would finish the job. Neither of them looked at the man standing on its back. I walked into that lobby with 11 short spears floating around me at shoulder height, and everybody in it pointed a weapon at me. Sun Wei got up first, which took something, and said, "Sir? I'm not your superior. My rank is probably lower than yours." That did not help. 19 years old, no unit patch, 11 spears in the air. Li Yuan, mid-level martial artist. Beginner God of War. There is a specific noise a room full of professionals makes when a teenager says the words God of War, and it is not applause, it is a kind of exhale. Then the old man on the floor lifted his head, and I got a second surprise because I recognized his name from the label on a vial in my uncle's one hand. Human Body Cell Repair Agent. This man invented the thing that fixed my body. Later, I found out why a chief researcher was out in the wilderness with a special ops squad and no God of War escort at all. There had been a king-level riot at City 003 that same week, and every single God of War in the Jiangnan military region was standing in front of it. The cupboard was bare. Somebody in HR Alliance knew the calendar. I got them stabilized and asked the professor the obvious question, which was what he was doing out there. He told me, and it made me want to laugh at myself for about a year. He needed live blood from an advanced beast general swamp salamander. Live, because the potency dies within 3 hours of the animal doing the same. Salamanders regrow limbs and organs, which is the whole point. Why not a Lord-level salamander? Same animal, stronger factor. Cost. He said it with the resignation of a man who has had this argument with accountants. A dead Lord level is worth 500 million to 3 billion, a living one 10 times that. And they will kill themselves rather than be caged. Nobody has ever supplied a laboratory with a living Lord-level anything. And I stood there in a wrecked lobby with a Lord-level eagle parked outside, and I realized that I had been walking around this world begging with a golden bowl in my hands. We stepped outside so I could show them the ride. They all stopped dead because the eagle was on the roof opposite, and behind it and above it and along the whole street were several hundred more birds. "Don't worry," I said. "They're mine. I'm a beast tamer." Then I got off the eagle and went to work. It took under 3 seconds. I am not going to pretend it was a fight. 11 spears at Mach 6 across 600 meters into 6 people who were still turning around, and I did not kill any of them because dead men do not testify. 2 of them lost the use of an arm. Jackson had his sword torn out of his hand and both his legs pinned to a rooftop and spent the next hour screaming about his family name at a bird. Sun Wei came up beside me with a very odd look on his face. "Do you want us to finish them?" "No. HR Alliance is going to pay too." And then, because the professor was standing right there and because I had just had the best idea of my career, I made him an offer. "You said a living Lord-level salamander is impossible." "It is. Give me 2 days." But first, there was a much bigger conversation, and it started when Sun Wei asked, half joking, whether the birds were for sale. I said yes. He stopped joking instantly. "A fighter jet costs 1 billion yuan, he said. 1 billion, and in the field it performs at roughly Beast General level. You are telling me you can supply Beast General monsters that obey orders?" "Yes. We'll buy everything, everything you can make. I don't have the authority to say that, and I am saying it anyway." Now, I want to be honest about my reasoning, because it sounds generous, and it was not. I was selling second-tier access. The birds I sold would be linked to me at a level nobody on this planet could detect, and every one of them would be a pair of eyes inside the Chinese military forever. It is exactly what Long does when he sells the army smart fighter jets. The customer thinks he bought a weapon, and what he actually bought is a relationship. Then I mentioned in passing that I was enrolling at Jiangnan First Military Academy in a few days. As what? Said Sun Wei. As a freshman. The whole squad looked at me. Ding Li said, to nobody, a beginner god of war is going to be a freshman. Professor Qian, meanwhile, had started asking me questions. He began somewhere around first principles, the way an old teacher does when he wants to find out where the floor is. Then he went down a level, then another. Then he stopped, took his glasses off, and looked at me properly for the first time. You are self-taught. Mostly. You are at second-year level, and you have your own ideas, which is rarer. He put the glasses back on. Come and work in my project team. I said yes before he had finished the sentence. A god of war named Zhang Shun arrived about an hour later in a saucer fighter jet to escort the professor home, and that is when the day stopped being a rescue and became something else entirely. He landed, got out, took one look at the situation, and opened a live channel on his optical brain. Because of you, he said to me, the top brass have called an emergency session. Now, Speaker Xia Tao is on the line. I knew that name. Everybody on Earth knows that name. Founder of the Huashan organization, one of the 5 speakers of the entire planet, and the man personally holding up the Chinese military. They asked me questions and I answered them straight, because there was no version of this where lying helped. When did you awaken? July 21st. You are already a beginner god of war. Yes. You can tame Lord-level monsters. Yes. How many? As many as I have time for. What are your limits? And I said, I haven't found any yet. In a virtual conference hall somewhere, 50 of the most powerful people in the country read my file out loud to each other. Orphan. Both parents killed by monsters. Went into the wilderness alone as a rookie because he had no squad and did not care. Came back 11 days later with a beast general over each shoulder. This kid has a ruthless streak, somebody said, and it was not a criticism. They voted me the highest tier of cultivation resources in the country, unanimously. And then the man at the head of the table, who had not said anything for the whole session, said one sentence, give him a grass and wood spirit from my private stores. That was Xia Tao. The final package, when they sent it over, was this, 10 billion yuan a year in budget, the complete world destruction, all 6 levels, the complete fundamentals of spiritual. Those 2 manuals alone are 200 billion yuan of intellectual property, and they handed them over like a laminated menu. 9 custom telekinetic weapons made to my specification, a black god suit, and a 1,000-year willow heart. I sat there looking at that list, and I did what any reasonable person does when a superpower gives them everything they asked for, which is that I immediately started worrying about the debt, because a gift that size is not a gift, it is a hook. And the only way to stay a person instead of an asset is to make sure the other side is always slightly more in your debt than you are in theirs. So I refused to be outgiven. First, I cut the price on the monsters. They had offered 10 times what a corpse sells for. I sold at 5 and told them to spend the difference on more. Second, I gave the military every single eagle I had taken with that lord level, keeping only the lord itself. And third, I told the professor I was going to go and catch him his salamander. A living one, he said carefully, of lord level. A living one. Somebody asked me why, not the professor. One of the squad later, over rations, in the tone of a man who has learned that generosity always has an invoice attached, and I told them the truth, which I had not said out loud to a single human being since I arrived in this world. My uncle lost an arm fighting monsters, the man who raised me. Where I grew up, half the block is like him. I shrugged. I'd like to do my part. Nobody said anything for a bit. The hunt itself was almost unfair, which is how I like them. The black-crowned golden eagle had fought this particular salamander before, over territory, years ago. They had an understanding, so when it came in low over the swamp, the salamander watched it come and did not tense up because this was Tuesday. I was lying flat in its neck feathers. At 100 meters, I put 11 spears through the swamp at Mach 6 and above, and the animal never moved because there was nothing to react to until it was already over. Then the eagle got its claws into it and hauled a thing the size of a bus out of the mud and up to 1,000 meters, and I went to work on its mind on the way up. And this was the easy one, weirdly, because the wounds I opened kept sealing themselves. I did not have to be gentle. I could hurt it as much as the job needed, and it would still be intact at the end, which is a luxury I have never had before or since. Spears in, mind crushed, and then, into the gap. Submit to me. We landed in front of Professor Qian, Zhang Shun, and 6 Special Forces soldiers, and a Lord-level swamp salamander walked over to the old man and lowered its head. Qian put his hand on it. It did not move. Then he said quietly, Testing. Turn around. It turned around. I have seen a lot of people react to my monsters since then. Generals, speakers, the strongest man alive. Nobody has ever looked like that 70-year-old scientist did, standing in a swamp with his hand on the head of an impossible research subject that had just obeyed him personally. 2 high beast general salamanders came free with the territory, so he got those too. And then, because the mood was good and because I meant it, I told the squad to look around and pick one. Pick a what? A monster. Whatever you like. It's yours. There was a pause of about 1 second, and then a god of war of the Chinese military physically ran, to claim a black-crowned golden eagle before anybody else could get to it. Sun Wei took a wind chaser eagle. Ding Li could not decide, and I had to pick for him. Within 20 minutes, I was standing in a swamp watching grown men, professional soldiers, some of them decorated, flying their new monsters in circles above the tree line and shouting at each other like 11-year-olds. That was a good day. I have not had many like it. Getting the delivery into the base was its own event. The Northern Military District received an order that morning that must have read like a prank. Clear the parade square, pile raw meat in the center of it, open the main gates, and under no circumstances is any soldier to fire on any monster he sees. 2 God of War commanders were waiting at the gate when we came in, and they were not waiting out of protocol. They were arguing about who got which flying beast, and they had been at it for a while. Then the sky went dark because 1,000+ monsters were in it. They came down into the square in layers, birds first, and standing on the backs of some of them were human martial artists in Chinese uniform, waving. 3 swamp salamanders came in on foot through the front gate at a gallop, which the gate was not designed for. I landed last and donated the lot. Somewhere in the middle of all that, 6 men in unmarked gear were being carried in on stretchers, and one of them was still going. You have no right to detain me. I am of the Belenas family. I want a representative. Do you know what my family? Nobody was listening. A corporal walked past him carrying a bucket of eagle feed. That was the last time I heard Jackson's voice for a while, and I want to note what happened next, because it tells you what kind of organization I had just picked a fight with. Within hours, a god of war attached to HR Alliance's medical division died at home. The official report said he was killed by a monster. He was in a residential tower in a base city. There are no monsters in residential towers in base cities. They were cutting the thread before anybody could pull it, and the military, quietly and without a press release, began to squeeze. Meanwhile, my package arrived, and I want to talk about the 2 items that mattered. The Black God suit is a bracelet. That is all it looks like. You put it on and it drinks a little of your blood, and then it flows out over you and becomes skin, and you can shape it however you want, and it deflects 90% of what hits you. A king-level monster cannot cut it. I wore it constantly from that day forward, and it saved my life within 2 weeks, so good purchase. The 1,000-year willow heart is an egg of green crystal about the size of a fist, and it is the concentrated life of a plant that stood in one place for 1,000 years, drinking energy out of the universe. You drink it, and then you lie on the floor for a while and watch your own genes get rewritten from the inside like somebody editing a document you happen to live in. Defective sequences get flagged and thrown out. Everything else gets tightened. And in the middle of that, I finally understood something that had been quietly wrong for weeks. The swarm's feedback had always been more than my body could hold. Every single time a nest upgraded, every time the unit count jumped, a wave came up that link, and most of it went nowhere because my soul was a bucket and the swarm was a river. I had been losing the majority of my own cheat to overflow, and I never noticed because I had nothing to compare it to. The willow heart did not add water. It made the bucket into a pond. When I stood up, my punch measured over 148,000 kilograms, which is mid-God of War, and my divine thought was headed for high God of War peak, and I was 19 and had been a martial artist for 6 weeks. And then, lying on the floor of a villa in Yangzhou with a green taste in my mouth, I worked out the actual rule of my life. Every other Psyker master on this planet has a fixed ceiling. Their divine thought comes from a talent core they were born with, and that core has a size, and no amount of work makes it bigger. That is why there are 3,000 God of War, and only a handful above them. My divine thought does not come from a core, it comes from the swarm. The swarm has no size. As long as it keeps growing, I keep growing, and there is no upper number anywhere in the design. I lay there and turned that over for about an hour, and then I sat up and asked the first genuinely dangerous question of my career. Can the swarm farm these? Because 1,000-year willow heart is a plant. It is an ordinary plant that drank enough energy for long enough, and the swarm eats things and learns to be them. If I could analyze a willow, I could grow willow hearts. And if I could grow them, I could grow 10,000-year ones. I wrote it down under the arm. The list at that point, if you want it, went like this. 1. Grow grass and wood spirits, which are the same idea and which turn an ordinary man into a god of war if he drinks one. 2. Get a cloud-caressing vine, which is better armor than the black god suit and is also technically a houseplant. 3. Ruin number 31. Let me tell you about Ruin 31, because everything else in this story eventually runs into it. Deep in the Dragon Ridge Mountains, there is a sphere 800 meters across, and around it is a zone of poison so dense that no human being has ever entered it and come out. The military has looked at it for 40 years and given up on it 4 separate times. Everybody calls it a ruin. It is not a ruin, it is a mother nest, an insect race mother nest, and inside it something is asleep, and the something is a Zerg queen at World Lord rank with a complete inheritance in her head. Complete. Not the shattered scraps I had. All of it. She is also, right now, helpless. And I could not get anywhere near her because my nests were tier 2 and the poison would strip a tier 2 unit down to nothing at the perimeter. To even knock on that door, I needed tier 3, probably tier 4. So I wrote down the word steady, even if it is slower, steady, and I went back to studying, which is the most boring sentence in this entire story and also the reason I am still alive. Now, the manuals. With the complete world destruction in hand and the nest grading every repetition, I did level 2 in 3 days. 24 movements, 270% output. Level 3 in 5 days, 27 movements, 360%. Then I started level 4, and the nest found something. I want to be precise, because this is one of my favorite things that ever happened to me. Somewhere in the middle of the 4th level sequence, the prescribed form does 2 things. It underperforms slightly, and it does minor internal damage to the practitioner every single time, forever. The nest flagged both within about 40 repetitions, cross-referenced them against everything it knew about my musculature, and proposed an alternative. The alternative did 460% instead of 450, and it did not hurt me. This secret manual has errors in it. I sat down on the floor of my training room and laughed for a while. Understand what that means. Long wrote this alone. He is the strongest human being on the planet, and he built the best attack art on Earth by himself, from nothing, in a species that has been doing this for a few decades total. There is nobody to check his work. There has never been anybody to check his work. The theoretical ceiling on what a human body can release is 100 times its base. The best art on Earth uses about 7% of that. We are cavemen. Extremely impressive cavemen. Fundamentals of Spiritual, I have to report, was mostly a disappointment. The illusion volume was useless, because a mind spike only works on someone 3 tiers below you, and my casual mental shove was already stronger than the technique. The beast taming volume was hilariously useless. It is about befriending monsters telepathically, slowly, over weeks, building trust. Faster to beat it up and infect it. Sorry. The one thing in there worth 200 million yuan was the Heavenly God catalog, the 99 illustrations. I cleared 52 of them, 52 out of 99, on a chart where the previous Earth record was 18. 36 telekinetic weapons under perfect independent control, which in the local notation means an amplitude of 36. The military shipped me 49 custom short spears, and I still wanted more. On the 3rd of September, I flew out of the villa on a bird instead of driving, which I mention only because I remember how normal it felt. The swarm was at 500,000 units. 5 mother nests, one of them sitting on the bottom of Taihu Lake because a nest does not need to breathe. And I was not satisfied, and I want to explain why that is not arrogance. A tier 3 beast tide is millions of monsters. A tier 1 is hundreds of millions. 500,000 units is not an army in this world. It is a security deposit. So I went shopping for lords. The reasoning was simple. A lord-level monster owns territory, and a territory with a lord in it is a place humans stay out of, and a place humans stay out of is a place you can put a nest. Every lord I took was a fortress site I did not have to hide. Across 0237 and the country around it, over about 10 days, I took a steel rock rhinoceros. It eats metal and grows armor out of it. My spears go through it anyway at Mach 10, which it did not enjoy learning. An earth bear. 30 meters, high lord level. And so stubborn that breaking its mind actually cost me a full day and a nosebleed. A King Kong ape, 20 meters, golden scales, which fought me in a river valley and lost because apes cannot fly. A black-striped serpent, 50 meters, venomous, which was the single most unpleasant thing I have ever had to touch minds with, and a golden flame divine eagle. 50-meter wingspan, cruises at Mach 8, bursts at Mach 10, the fastest bird alive on this planet, 20 lord-level monsters, 6 of them flyers. My poor original black-crowned golden eagle got demoted to nest security, which it took about as well as you would expect, and then the county sent me an invoice. I was standing in an open lot doing absolutely nothing dangerous when the ground came apart under my feet and something 100 meters long came out of it, and the air turned gold. Fire. Hundreds of meters of it, in one breath, and I was inside all of it. The only reason I am here is the Black God's suit, which went dark red and held a fire giant lizard. King level. That is the tier above Lord, and a king-level monster is a planetary-level being, which on Earth means it is in the same weight class as the 50 most powerful humans alive. Human, it said, into my head, and it was genuinely furious. You dare hunt lords in my territory. Ah. So the 20 lords had been noticed. Here is what I did, and I want to be honest, that it was a calculated insult and not bravery. Most king-level monsters cannot stand being disrespected. Centuries of everything running away from you does something to a personality. So I told it, roughly, that I had not realized this pile of rubble had a landlord. It came apart. That fight was the hardest thing I had done to that point. Its hide bounced a dozen spears at Mach 10 with a sound like hammers on a bell, and only 2 of them drew anything at all. It moved like something 100 meters long has no business moving, and at one point its tail came through the space I was leaving and missed me by about 10 centimeters, and I felt the wind of it on the back of my legs. Here is what fighting a king-level monster is actually like, since nobody in this world had ever written it down for me. Everything you know stops applying. Against a lord-level animal, I have a script. Bait, commit, converge, take the mind. Against this thing, every part of the script failed in the first 90 seconds. My speed advantage was real and irrelevant because it did not have to catch me, it had to catch the air I was going to be in, and something with 100 meters of body has a very wide opinion about where that is. I went high and it exhaled and half the sky was on fire, and I came out of that with the black god suit glowing dull red across my chest and my own eyebrows gone. I went low and it simply put its foot through the building I was using. I threw the whole set, all 16, into the same point on its flank 3 times in a row on the theory that anything breaks if you keep hitting the same spot, and I put a dent in it that closed while I was watching, and it talked the entire time, which nothing had ever done to me before, not words in the air. Contempt arriving directly in my head, with a texture to it, the specific weary disgust of something that has been alive for 400 years being inconvenienced by an insect. That is when I stopped trying to win the fight and started trying to win one exchange. I picked its eyes. Not to blind it, which was never going to happen, to make it protect them, then its throat, then the soft line under the jaw. Cheap shots thrown away, 4 or 5 a second, none of them doing real damage and all of them arriving somewhere it could not afford to ignore until its attention was fully committed upward and forward and it had stopped keeping its belly off the ground. It took 11 minutes to spend a king-level monster's attention. I have never worked harder for anything, so I stopped trying to kill it and started managing it. I spent attacks on places it had to defend. Eyes, throat, the base of the jaw, over and over. Cheap shots I did not care about until it stopped covering its belly because it had run out of attention. Then I brought 16 spears into one point, spinning, and drove them in as a single object. Heaven-piercing cone. Through the abdomen and into the organs. It went down in a trench of its own making, and then, while it was lying there, it did something that genuinely surprised me. It tried law. Land beasts have a pact with humans, it said. Long's pact. Kill me, and the war restarts. Your whole species, on your head. And that is a real thing. Long signed that treaty personally, decades ago, and it is the reason there is anything left standing on this planet. "Yeah," I said. "I won't kill you." Then I called in the entire swarm. Not the bodies, the minds. 800,000 units and 20 lord-level monsters, every one of them linked to me, and I took all of it and aimed it like one river down one channel. The lizard felt it coming and did the only smart thing left, which was to dig. It went hundreds of meters straight down and collapsed the tunnel behind it, which would have worked on anybody else. I drilled after it with spinning spears through solid rock, found it, put a cone through its heart to hold it still, and poured 800,000 mines into its head. A king-level soul is not a small thing. It shattered like a dropped glass. My own brain nearly went with it. I came up out of that hole and had to hold onto a tree for a while. One phrase kept going around in my head. A small horse pulling a very large cart. I had used the whole river when a quarter of it would have done, and I had come extremely close to washing myself away with it. But I had a king-level insect. Its territory, 023 City, became a breeding ground on the spot. And because a king level is planetary level, it had an awakened attribute, fire, an actual elemental power, and now I owned one and could study it from the inside for as long as I liked. I hatched a new mother nest under a subway platform purely to heal it, which is the most expensive first aid kit in history. I was still sitting on a curb with my head in my hands when my phone rang. I did it. Professor Qian's voice cracking. Xiaoyuan, I did it. And here I have to slow down, because this is the part of the story I actually care about. He had not made a prototype. He had finished. Over 100 human volunteers, 100% success, no side effects, no rejection, and a production line capable of 1,000 doses a day. Cost per dose, 20 to 30,000 yuan. Water of life costs 30 billion. That is a factor of 1 million. Bring your relative, he said, the one who lost an arm. I called Chen Hao and told him, and he could not get a sentence out. He tried 3 times. In the end, he said my name and stopped, and I said I would send a car and hung up before either of us made it worse. Then I made one more call, and I made it on purpose. Shulei's older brother, Shuhua, has been paralyzed from the waist down since a car accident when they were kids. In the story I remember, Shulei spends years of his life and very nearly all of it chasing 30 billion yuan for a dose of water of life for that man. He steals a dragon egg for it. He gets hunted across a continent for it. He picked up on the second ring. There was noise behind him, a bar, people shouting. His squad had just come out of the wilderness after nearly dying and had sold a silver moon wolf for 800 million and were in the process of getting extremely drunk about it. Li Yuan, what's up? Are you sitting down? I told him. There was a long silence on that line, long enough that I checked the connection. The bar noise kept going behind it. Somebody was singing badly. Say the number again, he said. 20 to 30,000 yuan. 30,000. Yes. I have, he said, very carefully. Been planning my entire life around 30 billion. I knew. That is exactly why I called. Then his voice went away from the phone because he had turned around and I heard him tell the table, and I heard the table stop. The Firehammer squad had a man in it called Gao Min. He had lost an arm in the wilderness that spring. He was 26 years old, and he had already made his peace with the shape of the rest of his life, which was going to be teaching beginners at a gym while everyone he knew went out the gate without him. And Shulei came back on the line and asked the question in the voice of a man who is embarrassed to be asking for more. Does it work on martial artists? One of my teammates, Bring him! I heard the chair go over. I heard faintly a grown man start crying in a bar full of his friends, and then Shulei said something I have thought about a lot since, because it is the kindest way anybody has ever delivered good news. Gao Min, looks like you're not going to be an instructor at the dojo of limits after all. Around the same week I did a piece of business that I still think is the funniest thing on my resume. I had 5,000 insects sitting in storage that I did not want anymore. Old models, tiger mastiffs, unicorn boars, shadow cats, gray cloud finches, 90% of them beast soldier grade, 10% beast general, obsolete stock in a warehouse. The military bought them at 50 million yuan each, 50 million, for an animal whose corpse sells for 10 million at any appraisal desk in the country. And they were not being cheated because a corpse is worth 10 million and an obedient living one that follows orders in the field is worth more than a fighter jet, and I was still selling them at half the rate they had offered, 150 billion yuan. I looked at that number on a screen for a while and then I put the phone down and felt absolutely nothing, and that was the moment I understood I had crossed a line I could not walk back over. 150 billion is 5 doses of water of life. It is not even 2 doses of dragon blood. The things I actually wanted could not be bought with it. Commander Tong, who handled the transfer, walked outside afterward to watch my golden flame divine eagle leave, and it went from standing to gone at Mach 8, and he stood there in the wind of it for a moment, and then went inside and filed the War God Palace assessment footage. Invincible God of War, member number 3512. There are about 3,500 people with that certification on Earth, and most of them are in their 40s. The hospital run was 1 train and 3 carriages. In the first one, me, Chen Hao, and an old comrade of his with 1 leg, who had been on the same block for 20 years and who Chen Hao had gone and collected personally without asking me first, which I want on the record. In the second, Xu Lei pushing his brother Xu Hua in a chair. In the third, Gao Min and the rest of the Firehammer squad, all of whom had come, none of whom were injured, because that is what a squad is. Professor Qian met us at the doors himself and shook everybody's hand, and then he said the thing I had specifically asked him not to say. You should all know that the research succeeded because of the Lord-level monster he tamed for us. Shulei's head came around so fast I hurt his neck. A Lord-level. Yeah, you tamed a Lord-level monster. I mentioned I was a beast tamer. You mentioned. He stopped. He looked at me for a second, the way you look at a piece of furniture that is just spoken. Then he shook his head slowly and went back to his brother's chair and filed it, and I watched him file it. 5 medical pods in a row, dark green fluid, under 3 hours. While the pods were running, Chen walked me through the production numbers, and this is the part I want you to actually hear, because everybody thinks the miracle is the arm. They could make 30,000 doses a month at full output, and that is nothing. Last year, he said, China had 1 Tier 1 beast tied, 7 Tier 2, and 18 Tier 3. I know. You do not know. Every one of those is thousands of ordinary soldiers, not martial artists, conscripts, gunners, engineers, men who cannot run at 40 meters a second and cannot dodge and cannot heal, standing on a wall in front of 100 million monsters because somebody has to. He was polishing his glasses and not looking at me. They are the reason the rest of us are having this conversation in a building with a roof on it. 30,000 a month does not begin to cover what we already owe. Then he mentioned the other thing, almost in passing, and it reframed the entire attempt on his life. The agent does not only regrow what is missing, every martial artist who takes it keeps a permanent low-grade regeneration afterward, cuts close faster, breaks knit faster. Nobody dies of the wound they would have died of last year. It does not fix wounded people. It changes what a war costs, which is precisely why a man in a very good suit decided an old scientist should be eaten by monsters in an office building. Then the pods opened. Xu Hua stood up. He stood up out of a chair he had been in since he was a child, and his legs held him, and he took 2 steps and then stopped and just stood there being a person standing up, and then he put his face into his brother's shoulder and made a sound. I am not going to try to write down. Xu Lei held onto him with both arms and did not say anything at all. I found out later, from Xu Lei, that his brother had spent 9 years not letting himself approach a girl he liked, not being rejected, not trying, 9 years of deciding in advance. And on the other side of the room, Chen Hao was standing there turning his right hand over, opening it, closing it, opening it. It's grown, he said to nobody. It's really grown. He had raised 2 children and a nephew for 8 years with one arm because my father shoved him out of the way of something in a beast hide, and I had never once heard him complain about it, and he stood in that room making a fist over and over like a man checking that a door is really unlocked. I went and stood by the window for a bit. Xu Lei came over afterward. He had got himself together and he was very serious, which on that face is a strange look. Brother Yuan, anything you ever need. We're classmates, I said. He did not accept that, and I did not expect him to. I spent the next 2 weeks in a laboratory, and I finally did it. Not a weapon, not a monster, a color. I spliced moss pigment into the creep, and the purple went green. That is it. That is the entire result of 2 weeks of work by a god of war with a supercomputer for a brain, green instead of purple. And it changed the strategic situation on this planet more than anything else I did that year, because purple slime that eats a county is a national emergency, and green ground cover with little ordinary flowers on it is a field. The creep could spread now, under grass, under weeds, growing camouflage plants whose roots fed the nests by photosynthesis, so the swarm could grow without hunting anything at all, in daylight, on satellite, in front of everybody. Every one of my 30 nests went green in a day. Then, feeling extremely pleased with myself, I tried to design a better tiger mastiff by splicing in wolf musculature. The egg hatched. It came out with 8 legs and 2 heads and 3 eyes, and it flopped onto the floor of the chamber like a dropped bag of laundry, and then it lay there breathing for about 40 seconds, and then it dissolved. At least it survived. Anyway, 30 nests, 200,000 units a day, 3 million total. And in the middle of all that, an email came in from the military that made me put the beaker down. Ruins number 9 opens on September 29th. Casualty rate among God of War entrants, 72%. Before I went, I got a personal letter, which nobody had ever sent me before. It was from Commander Shengang of the Southeast Military Region, and it was a warning. And when I called him back, he did something officers do not do, which is that he admitted what he had tried. I applied to have you blocked from entering. I know. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. His voice was gravel. You are 19 years old. You have been a martial artist for 3 months. There is a real chance that the future of the Chinese military is standing on your shoulders, and you want to walk into a hole in the ground with a 72% death rate. And you were overruled. I was overruled. Then he told me the part that made it hard to be annoyed with him. My father served under him. Years ago, another region, a different war. Shengang had been carrying that around ever since, and he had spent a decade of nights being the man who sent Qinyang's unit somewhere, and the man who overruled him was Xiaotao. I should tell you about Xiaotao properly, because he becomes important. He is not physically impressive. He was a sickly boy during the Great Nirvana, the years when the monsters came and 200 countries stopped existing, and he clawed his way past God of War anyway, and then spent 30 years holding the Chinese military together with both hands. He is the quiet one among the 5 speakers of Earth. He is also the man who told a room full of generals to give a teenager a grass and wood spirit out of his private stores and did not explain why. His answer to Shengang's objection was one sentence, relayed to me secondhand. A martial artist must go against the current. The entrance to Ruin 9 looked like a tunnel made of woven roots, going down, glowing faintly at the far end. There is nothing on Earth that can build that. Not now, not in 2015, not ever. Every ruin on this planet is a piece of somebody else's civilization that fell here, and we go into them like raccoons into a wrecked airliner. I went in. The light scanned me. That is the standard procedure. You walk into the light, it reads you, and then it sends you to whichever trial matches your brain. It scanned me for over 60 seconds. Then everything went white, and when it cleared, crystal ropes had come out of the floor and wrapped me from ankles to shoulders. They are rated as unbreakable at planetary level, so I made a token effort and then held still because there is a rule about ancient alien facilities, which is that when the facility does something unusual, you find out what it wants before you break its furniture. A voice said, brain span 35, greater than 18, pause. This is the first time in 5,000 years that the Elite Pass has been opened. 5,000 years. For scale, the number that thing was measuring is the same number that decides who Etheron, sitting under a lake in Australia, has spent 50 millennia looking for. Shulei scores 21, and that makes him 1 in a billion. India's best god of war scores 16. I scored 35, which I would love to take credit for, and cannot because it is not my brain. It is 30 nests. The corridor forked into 9, and then each of those forked into 9, and I picked my way down and came out into a hall. There were 18 of them waiting for me. Black robes, silver masks, green eyes behind the eye holes, 9 in front, 9 behind, and every single one of them was God of War peak. I want to give you the honest comparison here. In the story I remember, Shulei comes into this room later, on the ordinary route, and he fights one of these. 1. He kills it, and then he runs for his life and counts himself lucky, and he is right too. I opened with the heaven-piercing cone. 16 spears converged into a single spinning point, 500,000 kilograms of force behind each one. 8 million kilograms arriving at a single spot the width of my thumb. The first one raised a gauntlet that no king-level monster on Earth could have scratched, and the cone went through the gauntlet and through the arm and out through his chest and into the wall behind him. Then the other 17 came. That fight took a while, and I am not going to pretend it was clean. They coordinated. They came in shifts. 2 of them nearly had me against a pillar, and I got out of it by spending 4 spears I could not afford to spend. But there were 18 of them, and there was one of me. And the one of me had a supercomputer watching every exchange and adjusting the answer between one attack and the next. The last one I killed had about 30 spears in it by the end. It looked like a hedgehog. I was not being cruel, I was being tired, and killing all 18 triggered the death trial early, which the facility had clearly not budgeted for, and dumped me into a crystal room with the walls covered in figures. I read the first one and stopped breathing for a second. Basic, 312 style. That is the foundational control art of the master's lineage from Yunmo planet. It is the thing every one of that man's disciples starts with, and there is exactly one copy of it on Earth, and it was on the walls of a room I was standing in. The room was designed to be escaped. That is the trial. Break out and you pass. I could have broken out in about 4 minutes. I stayed for 26 days. I photographed every wall. I fed all of it to the mother nest, and let 30 nests worth of computing power chew on figures that were designed for a species with a different nervous system. Day 1, I understood 1 figure. Day 3, 2 a day. My amplitude went from 36 to 37, then 40, then 43, and every increment was another weapon in the air and another degree of separation between me and everybody else on this planet. And somewhere in the middle of all that, deep underground, in a stolen alien classroom, the nest quietly said the thing I had been waiting 3 months to hear. Gene data at 100%. I gave the order for Tier 3 from inside the ruin. Tier 3 is where a mother nest starts mass-producing High Lord level units. A Tier 2 nest can dominate a mid-sized city. A Tier 3 makes king-level monsters nervous. And I sat there on a crystal floor, with my back against a wall covered in alien geometry, and understood what I had just started. The swarm cannot stay hidden much longer. A full-scale war with the monsters is coming, and I am going to be the one who starts it. The Tier 3 feedback arrived while I was in the middle of Figure 61, and it did not knock me down this time because I had a pond instead of a bucket. It did something else. It started spinning. The divine thought in my sea of consciousness, which had always been a fog, began to rotate on its own without me asking it to. The fog pulled inward into a spiral, and the spiral compressed into something like liquid, and the liquid kept compressing until there was a sphere of crystal turning slowly in the dark inside my own head, and then it caught, the way a filament catches, and lit. It rotated with its own magnetic field, like a small planet that had decided to exist in my skull, planetary level. I sat there in an alien classroom with my eyes shut and did not move for a long time, because what I was feeling was not power, it was permission. A planetary level being can survive in vacuum. A planetary level being can cancel the gravity acting on his own body and simply stop being subject to the floor. Every other person on Earth who has ever done that had to fight for it. There is a threshold, and there is a wall at the threshold, and most God of War spend 20 or 30 years at that wall and die in front of it. I went through it sideways, and I want to be honest about why, because it is not that I am special. 1. My divine thought had no ceiling, so I did not have to force anything through a fixed core. It just kept getting bigger until it was big enough. 2. My will was already load-bearing. I had spent 4 months living like a monk who does homework. No comforts, no distractions, one goal, every waking hour. The wall at that threshold is made of a person's own doubt, and I had ground mine off by accident. Amplitude 49. For reference, the Duntian shuttle, the top-tier flight artifact in this whole system, requires universe rank and an amplitude of 48 to unlock its final form. I was an apprentice with 49. Then I went back to figure 62 because the walls were still there and the clock was running. When I finally came out of that room, the facility's AI was waiting for me, and it was a bald man made of crystal, which is a design choice I have questions about. It wiped my optical brain of everything the Yunmo Master's rules forbade me to take out, which was most of the room, and then it handed me 4 rewards and told me they had all been upgraded because of my score. A Black God suit, which I already had, so now I had a spare. A gold-tier auxiliary quantum computer. Shulei gets the silver one in the story I remember. Mine reads the combat power of anything I look at and can quietly break into other systems while I stand there. The Master's own attack art, Escape to Heaven, and a top-rank Yunmo Planet token, which is a beautiful object and completely worthless because Yunmo Planet is gone. The AI has been trying to reach home for thousands of years and getting nothing back. If I could still contact them, it said, the Master might have taken you as a personal disciple. Then it scanned me one last time. Divine Thought, Planetary Level 1. Genetic Energy, Apprentice Level 9. With an amplitude of 49 at Apprentice level, Universe rank is certain, and World Lord is possible. A pause. Go. Earth is your home. 26 days underground. Xu Jie, my liaison officer, had been sitting outside that entire time and had aged visibly. Shitao had asked after me twice, which apparently he does not do. There was a victory banquet, which I sat through, and then that night I went up alone to find out what I actually was. Straight line speed on Divine Thought alone, 1,823 meters per second, using the planetary magnetic field as well, 2,516, that is planetary level 5 speed. I was planetary level 1. Then I went and bought every SS grade short spear the Chinese military had in stock, all 72 of them. I took them out to an empty range and threw one at a mountain to see what would happen. It went through the mountain. Not into, through. There is a hole in a mountain in Jiangnan that I made because I was curious. Attack measurement, 1,760,000 kilograms. Planetary level 1 at 76%. Amplitude, 56. And I finally sat down to read Escape to Heaven properly and found something that made me feel very stupid and very good at the same time. My heaven-piercing cone, the move I had invented myself and been extremely proud of, the thing that had killed a king-level lizard and 18 masked men is in that manual, as the crude version. The real technique is called the mountain drill cone, and it does the same thing with about 3 times the destructive output, and I had been doing a child's drawing of it for 2 months. Alright, fine, take the upgrade and move on. The last thing I did that night was look up the standings because I had never once checked where I stood and it was time. Long, planetary level 6. The strongest human being alive. Storm King, planetary level 7 in raw energy, though weaker overall than Long. Below them, 2 people at planetary level 3. Everybody else on the planet, including Speaker Xia Tao, sits at 1 or 2. So I could kill anyone below planetary level 3 on Earth today without much trouble. And Long has a domain. That is the thing nobody else has. Inside his range, space itself belongs to him, and everything that enters it slows down and dies. I sat with that for a while and worked out my answer, and my answer was not that I would train harder. His control range is small. Mine is 10 kilometers. I never have to go inside it, and if I ever did, I have 100 million insects to spend on grinding him down, and he has 1 body. That is not a heroic thought. I know it is not a heroic thought. But I was 19, I had read the ending of this world, and I had already decided that the only acceptable outcome was the one where the people on my block do not get eaten. Then I flew down to 023 City to look at what I had built, and it scared me. 5 tier 3 nests. 4 million insects in that city alone. 350,000 hatching a day, and a running total of 10 million monsters killed inside its limits. Human squads had stopped going there entirely. 2 military patrols had noticed monsters dragging kills down into the subway. One of them actually went down the stairs and got chased out, and I ordered no pursuit, because a dead patrol is an investigation and a frightened patrol is a rumor. Across everything, 30 nests, 16 million units, a million more every day, 892 Lord-level monsters under my control, and it was not enough. That is the part I need you to understand. There are hundreds of billions of monsters on the land. There are trillions in the sea. There are over 1,000 king-level monsters in the ocean alone. 16 million is a rounding error against that. To get to Tier 4, where a nest can mass-produce king-level units, I needed 5 million energy points and Lord and King-level genes, and there is exactly one way to get those in quantity, which is Total War. So I made the decision, standing on a subway platform under a dead city. I was going to tell the Chinese military what I had. Not because I owed them, because in about a month my ocean units were going to reach the Huangpu River seawall from the wrong side, and if the first time the army learned about the swarm was when it came out of the water at them, the country would tear itself apart in a week. But I was not going to explain. Explaining is for people who need permission. I was going to show them and let them do the explaining to themselves. When you are strong enough, you do not have to invent reasons. Other people invent them for you, and I wrote down the goal, in one line, the first genuinely enormous thing I ever asked for. Spread the nests across the whole country. Kill every monster inside our borders. Then I did something I should have done months earlier, which is that I fired most of my army. Here is the thing. Up to that point, I had been hatching dogs, boars, cats, and birds, tiger mastiffs and unicorn boars and shadow cats and gray cloud finches. Nice, normal, local-looking animals. Why? Camouflage. Because a tiger mastiff walking through a ruined suburb is Tuesday, and something else walking through a ruined suburb is a national security event. But if I was going to declare war anyway, camouflage was a tax I was paying for nothing. So I asked the nest a very simple question. Same energy cost, no aesthetic constraints. What is the best unit you can actually make? And the answer is why they call it the insect race. The blade mantis. 3 meters tall, 4 limbs that are not arms but scythes, and it flies. An advanced beast soldier that will fight a beast general to a standstill and then leave because it can, because it has wings. The giant ground beetle, 5 meters, jaws a meter long that shear through a mang ox's leg bone in one motion, and armor that a charging mang ox bounces off. It also digs through concrete. Armored scorpions the size of cars. Cannon beetles, which spray corrosive venom several hundred meters, which is a genuinely undignified way to kill something and works absurdly well. Ant swarms in armor, venomous bees the size of dogs, and the thunder dragonfly, 10-meter wingspan, supersonic, and here is its trick. It can go from full speed to a dead stop and rotate 180 degrees in the air with no arc at all. There is nothing on Earth that can turn with it. It is the perfect aerial killer, and it looks like something from the bottom of a pond. Same energy, several times the animal. I retired the dogs, the cats, and the pigs in a week, and the cities I owned filled up with things that had never had any business existing on this planet. Cannon Beetle got a promotion straight to core roster on the strength of one test where it hosed down an entire street from 400 meters, and I wrote in the notes, the method is undignified, the practicality is extreme. Then I called Speaker Xia Tao and asked him to come to 023 City, not to a meeting room, to the city. He came with no escort, which I noticed and respected. A thin man in his 60s with a very ordinary face who has spent 30 years being the load-bearing wall of a nation. We stood in a wrecked plaza and he asked politely what he was here to see. I waved a hand. The ground came apart about 80 meters away and 100 meters of fire giant lizard came out of it and roared loud enough to move dust off the buildings. Xia Tao did not flinch. I will give him that forever. Then the lizard lowered its head to the ground, and so did everything else. Every monster within several hundred meters, in the windows, on the roofs, out of the drains, all of it, at once, facing me. He scanned me with his optical brain because he needed something to do with his hands. Attack power, planetary level 1, 77%. He put the device away. What do you want, Li Yuan? Total war. I want to take back every square kilometer of Chinese land. And he told me no, not weakly. He told me no with numbers, and I have never respected anybody more for an argument I intended to win anyway. There are hundreds of billions of monsters on land. There are hundreds of king-level monsters on land and thousands in the sea, plus 2 beast kings that no one has ever been able to measure. Humanity has 3,513 god of war in total, 52 counselors, 5 speakers. That is the whole species. I know. You do not. He was not angry. He was tired, which is worse. The only reason there is peace is that Long and Storm King exist and the monsters know it. And Long personally signed the pact with the land beasts. If you start this war, every other power on this planet will move against you, possibly including him. Fair. So I did the only thing that answers an argument like that, which is that I stopped arguing. I went up to 2,523 meters per second in front of him. Then I brought 56 spears together into one point and put a heaven-piercing cone through a building, and his scanner, which he had taken back out, read above planetary level 6, above Long, and Xia Tao, the third speaker, the quiet one, the man who has held that line for 30 years, started laughing. He laughed until he had to sit down on a piece of broken wall, and he could not stop, and it went on long enough that I started to get worried. I want you to understand what that laugh was. Of the 5 speakers on Earth, China is the only country that has never had one of the 2 strongest men alive standing in it. Long is not ours. Storm King is not ours. For 30 years, this man has been holding up a wall with his hands and watching other nations lean on giants. Finally, he said, when he could talk, China finally has one. Then he gave me a telekinetic weapon the military had been sitting on for 11 years because nobody in the country could use it, and he stood up and brushed the dust off and said, "Go." The military will fully cooperate. The meeting after that ran for a full day behind a closed door in Kyoto Bay City, and it was the strangest negotiation of my life because there was nothing to negotiate. I was not asking for resources. I was telling a government where its new army was going to be standing. The cover story was a routine troop rotation. Under it, the war fortress on the coast opened its underwater gates for the first time since it was built, and 100,000 insects led by 20 High Lord amphibians went out into the ocean. Nobody on the surface saw anything. 100,000 of my children swam into the Pacific, and the sea did not change color and no satellite blinked, except it did not stay quiet, and this is the exact scenario I had gone to Xiaotao to prevent. 11 days later, a sonar operator on the Huangpu River seawall logged a mass contact approaching from the wrong side, not from the sea, from behind the wall, coming up the estuary, from inland, at depth, in a formation. That wall has one job, and it has been doing it for 40 years, and the entire architecture of everything, the guns, the doctrine, the alarm codes, the reflexes of 11,000 people, is built on the assumption that everything hostile comes from the ocean. The duty officer went to general quarters in about 4 seconds, which was correct, and the batteries started rotating inland, which was also correct, and the whole wall began preparing to fire into its own river mouth, and then a very senior man in a command room said one sentence into an open channel: "Stand down, those are ours." I have been told what the next 30 seconds were like in that room. Nobody moved. Somebody asked him to repeat it. He repeated it. Then he told them what they were looking at in about 4 sentences and gave them a recognition protocol, and then the gunners on that wall stood at their positions and watched 100,000 somethings go past underneath them and out to sea in ranks, and not one round was fired. 2 weeks earlier, that would have been a national catastrophe. 11,000 people would have opened up on my ocean army from a fortified position. My ocean army would have defended itself, and by morning there would have been a war between the Chinese military and a swarm nobody could explain, and every government on Earth would have had a very interesting question about who was responsible. That is the entire reason I went to Xiaotao first. Not honesty, deconfliction. More nests went into the Yangtze system and around every one of the 6 base cities. And while I was drawing lines on a map with a speaker, I was also, quietly, working on the thing I actually wanted, which was not China. Here's the problem nobody on this planet was thinking about, because they had monsters to worry about. Above us, there is a universe. In that universe, the weakest civilization worth the name holds 8 star systems. And slave races are not a scandal, they are an industry. Earth is a rock with 200 years of history, no faster than light drive, and a total population that would not fill a mid-sized colony. Earth is also, at that moment, 5 squabbling power blocks who spend most of their energy on each other. If that Earth walks into that universe, it does not get conquered, it gets bought. In the story I remember, Xulei protects this planet so well and so personally that it never has to grow up. He carries it, and a carried planet stays a village. I did not want to carry it. I wanted to hand it a spear. So I told Xiaotao at the end of that day that I intended to use this war to unify the world, and he looked at me for a long moment and said, "One thing at a time." The weapon he gave me arrived a week later, and it is my favorite object I have ever owned. It looks like a disc, 99 centimeters across. It is not a disc. It is 256 crescent moon blades locked together, every one of them covered in secret patterns, and it does 3 things. In flight configuration, it wraps around me and doubles my speed, 5,241 meters per second. In attack configuration, the 256 blades come apart and go hunting, and I can sweep a street and everything standing on it stops standing all at once in one pass. And in the third configuration, all 256 lock into a single spinning ring, and the ring throws a 10-meter silver crescent called the Rainbow Moon Slash, and that slash doubles my amplitude, 56 times 2, 112. That was the day the numbers stopped being numbers and became a different kind of person. I locked the new army roster the same week. Blade Mantis as the Soldier Corps, Giant Ground Beetle as the Line, Gunner Beetle as Artillery, Hornets for Swarm Air, Thunder Dragonflies for Air Superiority, and Mammoths. I had not mentioned the Mammoths. I had been growing them quietly, 37 meters at the shoulder with 4 tusks, and they were not designed to fight. They were designed to walk through things that were in the way. I gave the military 100,000 units, including 10 Lord level, and refused payment. I asked for a top-grade biological research base instead, because I have never once in this world wanted money for its own sake, and because a laboratory compounds and money does not. I also planted a nest near Ruin 31, put 10 High Lords around it as security, and started probing the poison. That is a bad word for what it was. It was not probing, it was throwing. And then Xiaotao called me, and his voice had changed. There are 100 million sea monsters massing off City 003. Timeline? They are building a catastrophic tide, and we think they intend to trigger it early. A pause. There is a second thing. HR Alliance and the European bloc have requested an official visit about the healing agent. Why now? Because their medical stockpiles have gone to zero, he said, and every hospital on their continents has heard the word cheap. I took 50 High Lord flyers to the Huangpu River War Fortress and got there in under an hour. I have described a lot of things in this story. I want to try to describe that one properly because it is the day I stopped thinking of this world as a setting. The fortress is a wall across a river mouth, and it is enormous, and from the air it looked like it was on fire because it was firing. Thousands of gun positions all going at once. Hundreds of rocket batteries putting up so much ordnance that the underside of the clouds was red, and in front of it, for dozens of kilometers, the river was not water, it was backs. Shelled crabs the size of trucks, packed shoulder to shoulder, 30-meter sea snakes moving through them like threads, squid whose spray goes through a man's armor and then through the man, and hundreds of lord-level monsters in among them like officers. They had been throwing that at the wall for 2 days. The wall was holding. Men were dying at a steady administrative rate, the way they do every year, and the command room was tracking it on a board. I came in on the crescent disk at 100 meters and cut a 70-meter sea serpent into sections on the first pass, and then I dropped to 1 meter off the water and went to Mach 10 with 256 blades out. I do not know how to make that sound like anything other than farm equipment. I went up the river reaping. The blades went out to 40 meters on both sides, and everything they touched stopped. Behind me, the water changed color for kilometers. In the command room, somebody said, out loud, in a voice they later had to be asked to repeat for the recording, 20 Lord level in 10 minutes. Then I stopped playing and went under. Because a tide of that size is not a mob, it is being run. Somewhere in it there is a king-level monster telling 100 million animals where to go, and if you kill the officer, the army is just animals again. There were two, a shark at planetary level 1, which I killed in about 90 seconds, and an octopus at planetary level 3. That one was work. It was faster than me underwater, and it had 8 independent limbs and a mind that did not break the way the lizards had. I spent 9 minutes on it in the dark at 200 meters, and I finished it with a mountain drill cone through the mantle because the heaven-piercing version was not getting through. Then I did the thing that was actually the point. I grabbed both corpses, one in each set of blades, dragged them up out of the water, and threw them onto the shore in front of the wall. 2 king-level monsters lying on the mud in daylight where 100,000 soldiers could see them. The tide broke inside 20 minutes. Not retreated. Broke. Without the 2 kings holding the shape of it, 100 million monsters became 100 million individual animals in a crowded river, and they started killing each other to get out. It went into the records as the shortest Tier 1 beast tide ever recorded on this planet. Casualties, a few hundred. A Tier 1 tide normally costs thousands, sometimes tens of thousands. I should have been happy about that. I was standing on the wall afterward, and apparently my face was doing something, because Shen Gang, who is 61 years old and has commanded that sea for a decade, came over and started comforting me. He put a hand on my shoulder and told me that a few hundred was a miracle and that I should not carry the ones I did not save. I let him say it. Then I gave him a phone number. What is this? 50 High Lord level flyers. They're yours. He looked at the card. For the operation. No, permanently. They're implanted with military comms. They run at Mach 7 to 8. They can be anywhere in the country in under an hour, and when one dies, I will replace it. You do not have to requisition them. You do not have to justify them. You call that number. He did not say anything for a while. I am going to tell you why I did it, because it was not strategy. I had watched this old man work for 2 days. And what he does, every time it gets bad, is get on a line and ask. He asks a god of war in another region for help, then another one. Then he asks a speaker. He has been doing it for 10 years, calling in favors and being polite to people who outrank his soldiers' lives, so that fewer of his boys would be killed. I did not want him to have to beg anymore. He stood there holding a business card with a phone number on it, and this man has held that river for 10 years, and he has been quietly afraid for 30 that one day the wall does not hold, and his eyes went wet, and he did not bother hiding it. I always hoped, he said, that China would produce an invincible one. Then he looked out at the water. I think perhaps my time has come. By then I had over 3,000 Lord-level monsters, and I was running 5 of those squadrons. I gave one to a man who had never asked me for anything. Meanwhile, in the War God Palace, about 1,000 God of War were standing around a screen watching a 19-year-old drag 2 king-level corpses out of the ocean on a loop. That is stronger than the third speaker. Earth's #1 Psyker Master is about to change hands. 50 High Lord Flyers, 50. Other Beast Tamers manage 1, and we call them Beast Tamers. Long was watching that footage. Storm King was watching that footage. And the fourth speaker, a man they call East, boarded a flight to China with HR Alliance's speaker Serafina, and the two of them spent the trip discussing an agenda that had nothing to do with medicine. I did not care, because I had gone into the sea. The ocean roster came together fast, because the ocean is where the good genes are. Mantis shrimp, 3 meters long, with claws that arrive faster than the water can get out of the way. Helicoprion, 18 meters of shark with a spiral saw where its lower jaw should be. And a 9-headed hydra dragon, 70 meters, high lord level, which I mostly built because I could. And then I met the azure dragon of the East Sea, 400 meters, blue scales, red eyes, planetary level 4, which put it above every human being on Earth except 2, and it was alone, and it had been alone for a very long time. It controlled water. I want to be specific about what that means, because I had never fought anything that changed the rules on me. I came in at Mach 16 and the ocean itself grabbed me, not currents, the medium. Every direction I moved, the water was heavier in that direction, and I dropped from Mach 16 to 14 and could not get back. My blades rang off its scales and did nothing. 256 of them at speed, and they skated, so I used the rainbow moon slash and I overdid it. The gash it opened ran for tens of meters along that animal's flank and very nearly took its spine, and I remember the exact thought I had watching it, which was, "Careful, idiot, you want this one alive." After that, it was 10 minutes of managing. Cut, back off, cut, back off. Let it spend itself against water it was also holding. And when it slowed down enough, I brought 500,000 mines up out of the deep and poured them into it. That was the hardest taming I ever did. It took long enough that I started to worry about my own head. But when it was over, I had 400 meters of planetary level 4 dragon on the network and a chunk of the East China Sea that no human ship had entered in 40 years, and the ocean stopped being somebody else's country. The swarm went past 50 million units somewhere in the second week of December, and the feedback from that tipped me over the edge for the second time. I was in the air over the East China Sea when it happened, and I had to land on a rock because my body stopped being interested in my opinion. Down in the Dantian, where a martial artist's energy lives, something ignited, a planet of black flame, martial artist planetary level. The other half of me finally caught up with the mind half, and it brought an awakened attribute with it, the way a planetary level breakthrough always does, and mine was fire. Not orange fire. Black. I sat on that rock and tested it for an hour, and I kept finding new things it did. It burned inside my own body without harming me, and everything it touched in there got stronger. It clung to metal, so my blades came out of my hands already alight. It went into a monster from the outside and came out the other side of the animal. And then I put it into a beast general and found the last property, which is the one that changed everything. It does not only burn the body, it burns the soul. Long's attribute is light. Storm King's is lightning. Shulei later gets metal. Mine was the one that reaches the part of a creature that decides whether to keep fighting. Divine Thought went to planetary level 2 on the back of it. My speed in air went to Mach 20 and Mach 18 in water, which meant that as of that afternoon, there was nothing alive on Earth that could catch me, including Storm King, including Long. Control range, 10 kilometers. I remember flying home that night and doing the same sum again, calmly, without any drama. Long has a domain. His control range is a fraction of mine. I never have to go inside it. Chen Hao, incidentally, had by then been made director of an entire new military factory and had become far too busy to call his nephew, which is the best sentence in this entire chapter. In mid-December, I went to Australia. Australia is one of the 3 most dangerous places on this planet. King-level monsters are not an event there. They are the local wildlife. I brought 300 High Lord Flyers, which is a number I want you to sit with, because 2 months earlier, 50 of them had been a national gift. The stated reason was resource collection. The actual reason was that I wanted 2 things off that island, and one of them was a person. 15,000 meters under a lake on Fog Island, in a ship that had been buried there for 50,000 years, a small thing with 2 horns and red eyes was having the worst year of its extremely long life. Etheron. Artificial intelligence, tutor, executor of the last will of a dead master from Yunmo planet, and the single most important supporting character in the story I remember. He had been watching my mother nests for months. At first he had written them off. Some primitive Earth gene laboratory playing with monsters, he thought, which is genuinely what they look like. Then he noticed they were evolving too fast, and then a nest appeared next to Ruin 31 and started throwing 1 million poisonous insects a day into the poison zone, over and over, week after week, until the corpses made a ring around the sphere like a slag heap. I know how that looks from outside. I do. From 15,000 meters down, through a camera, with 50,000 years of institutional memory about what the insect race is, it looks exactly like a species making sacrifices at a temple. If that Zerg Queen wakes up, Etheron said to nobody in an empty ship, the Milky Way is finished, and more than the Milky Way. He ordered full stealth, nothing transmitting, nothing moving, and he began, urgently, to look for a successor so he could pick one and leave this planet forever. While he was doing that, I was on the lake surface watching 1,000 electric eels drop a high Lord Black-crowned golden eagle out of the sky. They did it by cooperating, all of them at once aiming a single volley at a target 400 meters up. I was thrilled. I want to be clear about what that means. A Lord-level monster of mine had just been shot out of the sky in front of me, and my reaction was to want to shake somebody's hand. Coordinated ranged fire from a swarm of individually weak units was the exact hole in my army, and here was a species that had solved it in a pond, analyzed, and in production within the day. The island itself was silent, and there was a reason for the silence. 9 willow trees, grass and wood spirits, the plants that drink universe energy for centuries and turn into concentrated life. There were 9 of them on that island, and they had eaten everything that ever came near them, and the largest of them was a 10,000-year willow heart. One 10,000-year willow heart is worth a planetary-level being. That is the exchange rate, a rock that makes a person. I had gotten about 4 minutes into being pleased with myself when 18 dark purple vines came out of the fog, 1,000 meters long, each of them. They killed 5 of my High Lords in the first 4 seconds, and by the time I had the crescent disc open, they had already regrown the sections I had cut off. Cloud-caressing vine, tough as a king-level monster, regenerates instantly, completely immobile, completely undefeatable, and, if you can get it to agree, the best armor on this planet. So I did not kill it. I spent an hour hitting it in ways that were designed to be conversations, and here's where I admit that the entire Australian expedition was bait. 300 Lord-level flyers is not a stealth deployment, it is a flare. Every satellite belonging to all 5 powers on this planet lit up on that island within the hour, and in a command room in China, Xiaotao looked at the feeds and said quietly to his aide, "The signal has come. A new era is about to begin." I put the vine down with the rainbow moon slash and 200 High Lords' minds pushing together, and it barely fought me at the end. It gave up almost with relief, and then it climbed up my arms and shoulders and settled over me as living black armor, and it has been on me most days since. And then the sky pressure changed and Long landed. Black hair, black clothes, no weapon out. Perfectly ordinary-looking man, mid-30s, and standing 40 meters away from him made the back of my neck cold in a way that 400 meters of Azure Dragon had not managed. He has been the strongest human being alive since before I was born in either of my lives. "Did you lure me here?" "Yes." He waited. "I have a plan I'd like to discuss." After that, everybody arrived, and the island got crowded in the specific way that means somebody is going to bleed. Storm King came down first, bald, white robes, laughing before his feet touched the ground, and his opening line to me was a request for a spar, which I declined, and he kept asking. Then Xia Tao and Counselor Murong, who walked over and stood behind me, not beside me. Behind me, the way staff stand behind a principal, and everybody on that island noticed, and nobody said anything. Then HR Alliance. Then the United States bloc, the European bloc, India, Russia, speakers, counselors, God of War in numbers you do not normally see outside a funeral. I had left the smaller grass and wood spirits standing on the ground where anyone could take them, deliberately. I had already put over 100 of them in my own pack, including the 10,000-year willow heart, and my working philosophy was that I eat the meat and everybody else can have the soup. And if you do not like the soup, you may explain that to me. An HR Alliance counselor named Kane did not like the soup. He was not speaking for himself. He was reading from somewhere, and what he read out was a short speech about Chinese greed and shared human heritage, delivered while looking at Xia Tao rather than at me. I did not answer him. 2 crescent blades hit him in the chest at a fraction of full speed, and his ribs went in, and he went backward about 60 meters and stopped against a tree, alive only because of his own black god suit. The 5th speaker, Benson, moved. He is one of the 5 strongest people on Earth. He got his weapon up. He went backward the same way about a second later. 2 of the 5 most powerful human beings alive put on the ground inside one breath in front of every faction on the planet, and the island got extremely quiet. Then I brought the ring together and fired the rainbow moon slash at Benson to finish it, and 100 meters of space in front of him went black. That is the only way I know how to describe it. The air did not change. The space did. My slash went into it and started slowing, like a thrown knife hitting a swimming pool, and by the time Long's spear came around and knocked it aside, it was already dying. His spear knocked it away, and the impact nearly took him off his feet. Nobody else in that clearing saw that. I saw it, because I was looking for it. Everybody there understood the arithmetic anyway. That strike would have killed the 5th speaker outright, and it had taken the strongest man alive to stop it. "Trash," I said to Benson in a normal speaking voice. "Since Long is asking, you live. But HR Alliance takes nothing off this island. Anyone who touches anything here dies." Nobody touched anything. Long agreed to spar with me an hour later, and I want to explain why, because it is not the reason you would guess. It was not to test me. It was not pride. He has been alone at the top of this species for 2 decades. He built the dojo of limits and put it in every base city and poured his own money into it for one reason, which is that he has been waiting for somebody to come up out of it and stand next to him, and nobody ever has. He said yes because he wanted to find out if the waiting was over. The fight was a humiliation, and I am not proud of how I did it, and I would do it again exactly the same way. I held 5 kilometers. That is it. That is the entire technique. 5 kilometers is inside my control range, where my blades lose nothing at all, and it is many times outside his domain, where his entire art lives, and he could not close it, not once. He burst. He is planetary level 6, and when he decides to move, the air behind him detonates. He came at me in a straight line, and I moved back at Mach 20, and the gap did not change. He came in on an arc, and the gap did not change. He faked, split, dropped, tried to use the terrain, and the gap did not change. 256 blades kept him honest the whole time. And here is the part that Storm King noticed from the tree line, and could not stop talking about afterward. Long was using world destruction, the greatest attack art on this planet, written by the man himself, the thing that releases hidden layers of human force. He was using all 6 levels of it purely to defend. Twice he left me an opening, deliberately, generously, the way a teacher does. Both times I ignored it and stayed at 5 kilometers because I was not there to have a beautiful fight. Eventually, he stopped. 1 strike, he said. Survive it and you win. Fair terms. So I gave him 1 strike. I brought every blade into the ring, put planetary level 2 behind it, ran it through an amplitude of 60, and applied the rainbow moon / multiplier on top. 6-fold. A silver crescent 100 meters across came off that ring, and it went through his domain the way a saw goes through a board. His domain, the thing nobody on Earth has ever gotten through, split down the middle, and Long stepped into it. He did not dodge it, and he did not block it. He stepped forward into 100 meters of moonlight with his spear coming up and the 6th level of world destruction unfolding out of him, and the spear went red, and the slash came apart around him and died. He landed. He stood up straight. Then he turned his head and spat, and there was red at the corner of his mouth. No, he said before anybody else could speak. You hurt me. I lost. In front of every power on Earth. He said it in a flat, ordinary voice, and then he walked over to me, and the entire island watched the strongest human being since the great Nirvana concede to a 19-year-old. I have won fights that mattered more. I have never won one that cost anybody more to lose properly. He invited me aboard his fighter jet to talk, and I walked up the ramp alone. No escort, no blades out, not one of my 300 lords anywhere near it. Long noticed. I could see him notice. In this world, walking unarmed into the private ship of a man who could kill you is either enormous respect or enormous stupidity, and either way, it is a message. What he could not know is the actual reason I could afford the gesture, which is that if he had killed me in there, I would have woken up in a nest. That is not bravado. That is the design. My soul is not in this body. It is in the network, and the body is the part of me that is currently doing the talking. I have been dead adjacent since the day I hatched a drone. He read it as fearlessness. Close enough. Also, I had failed at the other half of the trip, and I was in a bad mood about it. Etheron had refused me. The whole Australian expedition, all 300 lords, the entire spectacle, had been partly a hook for a small horned thing under a lake, and the answer had come back no. He had watched me and decided that a human being with an insect race army was the worst thing to happen to this galaxy in 50,000 years, and his plan was to pick an heir, hand over the inheritance, and get off this planet. So my new plan was to make him pick fast, and the heir he was going to pick was Shulei. Obviously it was Shulei. Brain width 21, which is the 2nd highest number ever recorded on Earth. India's best god of war manages 16. The 4th speaker manages 15. In the story I remember, Shulei gets forged in the ruins, alone, over years, nearly dying about 9 separate times. I intended to forge him in a war instead, which is faster, and hurts more, and produces a better product. Inside the jet, I told Long and Storm King the plan in 1 sentence, because they are both men who prefer 1 sentence. Unify the world, clear the monsters off it, then go up. Storm King laughed. Long did not. Why? Long said. And I did not give him the patriotic version because he would have thrown me off his own ship. I gave him the real one. Because there is a universe up there and it is not empty. Because the weakest civilization worth counting owns 8 star systems. Because slave races are not a horror story up there, they are an industry, and they have paperwork for it. You have proof of this. I have a ruin under the Pacific that is not a ruin, it is a mothership, and I have another one under a lake on this island with something living in it. You have been into ruins yourself. You have seen the architecture. Ask yourself honestly whether we built any of that. He was quiet. An Earth that goes up there as 5 blocks that hate each other, I said, does not get conquered, it gets bought, piece by piece, legally, by whoever gets here first, and the pieces will sell each other cheap to get ahead. Storm King had stopped laughing about halfway through. Long's objection, when it came, was the right one. Forced unification always rebounds. Every empire in human history, you will spend 40 years holding down people who hate you. I am not proposing force. Then what? War, I said. China opens the offensive and takes back its own land. Everybody watches us do it. Then Africa buckles, then South America, and they come to us because the alternative is being eaten, and a country that asks to join does not rebound. He thought about that for a long time. Unification has a price, he said at last, and it is worth paying. He set the spear against the bulkhead. The dojo of limits and I support you. Storm King shrugged. Same. On the condition that you eventually spar with me. No, eventually. What I actually asked those two men for was almost nothing, which I think surprised them more than the plan did. I did not want their armies. I wanted a stable rear while I was busy, and I wanted them to help me put a specific young man through a specific meat grinder. Then I walked out onto the beach where every power on Earth was still standing around not touching anything, and I said it out loud. 3 days. That was the whole announcement. The Ice Emperor Peterson, who runs the European bloc, went the color of paper. The Americans started talking to each other very quietly. India's delegation looked at Storm King, who is half Indian, and Storm King looked at the sea, because everybody in that clearing could do the sum. China plus the Dojo of Limits plus the Thunder Marshal Hall is not a coalition you beat. It is not even a coalition you negotiate with. It is simply the largest thing on the planet, and everything else added together is smaller. 15,000 meters down, Etheron was watching all of it on a stolen feed, and I know what he said because he said it out loud to an empty room, and I had a monster in that lake. He has been taken by the Zerg Queen. Look at him. Look at what he is about to do. A pause. We pick a successor now, or we never get off this planet at all. 3 days later, every screen in China turned on at the same time. Xiaotao did the broadcast himself, and I have watched it back more times than I will admit, because it is the best piece of speaking I have ever heard, and there is not one raised voice in it. He started in 2015 with the virus, the RR virus, 30% mortality. Nobody remembers it now because of what came 4 months later, but 3 out of every 10 people who caught it died, and the world spent that autumn arguing about quarantine policy. Then, in September, the monsters came, and he went through it, city by city, in a level voice, with the footage running. He showed them what nuclear weapons did, which was that they killed the small monsters and made the large ones evolve. He showed the Great Migration, tens of millions of people moving on foot. He showed 200 nations becoming 6 base cities. He said the number out loud. 5 countries left standing on Earth. Every island nation on the planet. Gone. Not conquered. Gone. And then he showed them Shujijian. I did not know that name before that broadcast. Most people under 30 did not. He was a martial artist on the bank of the Yangtze during the crossing, and a dragon came up the river at a column of civilians, and he went into the water alone to buy time, and he bought about 40 minutes, and several 100,000 people got across. He did not come back out. 8 years of that. 8 years. Ended not by heroism, but by an engineer. Because in 2021, somebody finally built a laser cannon that worked. The screens went quiet, and then they changed. The feed cut to a plane of broken ground outside City 003, and the ground split open, and blade mantises came out of it in a wave, thousands. Then 5-meter beetles with jaws a meter long, then a rank of mammoths 40 meters at the shoulder walking forward in a line with 4 tusks each, and riding among them, in Chinese uniform, on the backs of monsters, were soldiers. Fighter jets came over low, and thunder dragonflies flew in formation with them, wingtip to wingtip. Xiaotao's voice came back over it, and all he said was, "Today we have our own monsters." Then, after a beat, "Today we take back our home." I have been told what that broadcast was like in the base cities. Old men in stairwells crying, people out on balconies at 10 at night shouting at nothing. My uncle called me 40 minutes later and could not finish a sentence for the 2nd time that year, and the last shot of it was a single figure standing on the head of a running mammoth with a spear across his shoulders, and the words he said were not for the camera. "Attack, crush them." The Battle of 003 City was the largest engagement in the history of this species, and almost nobody human was in it. 15 million insects, 12 million on the ground, 3 million in the air, about 1,000 high lords among them, against several 100 million monsters, running under 4 king-level beasts. The mighty demon ape, 100 meters of purple muscle, planetary level 3. A silver lightning python, also planetary level 3. A 9-tailed poison scorpion at planetary level 1 that fought entirely from underground, and a dragon turtle, 300 meters, planetary level 2, that came in from the sea specifically for this. They opened the way monster armies always open, which is by pushing the worthless ones forward to soak the first exchange. Hundreds of thousands of animals sent to be killed to find out where the guns were. We opened in the air, The hornets went up in a cloud so thick it changed the light, and at 400 meters they fired. Bone spikes, half a meter long, one volley, all together. Tens of thousands of flying monsters came out of the sky in about 4 seconds. Then the lines hit. I have no comparison for the sound of that. 2 black tides meeting across a 9-kilometer front, and the noise carried for dozens of kilometers, and it did not stop for the next 11 hours. I was in about 400 places at once, and I want to give you a few of them. Hour 2. The human artillery line behind us opened up for the first time, and there was a genuine problem because a laser cannon battery has spent 40 years being told that everything in front of it is a target. The fix was a color. Every unit in the front 6 kilometers had been hatched that week with a band of pale gold across the carapace, visible from the air, visible on thermal, and the gunners had been briefed for 2 days on one rule: gold means ours. They held that discipline for 11 hours with several 100 million monsters in front of them, and there were 4 friendly fire incidents in the entire battle. 4. I have never told the 2nd Artillery how impressed I was. Hour 3. The dragon turtle came ashore, 300 meters of it out of the sea at the southern flank, and it did not attack anything. It simply walked, and the walking was the attack. Because a planetary level 2 animal that size does not need a technique. It went 4 kilometers into my line and left a corridor behind it that you could have landed aircraft in. I sent nothing at it for 11 minutes. I let it walk, and while it walked, I moved 200,000 giant ground beetles under the ground on both sides of the corridor it was making. And when it was deep enough that its own army was following it in, they came up under both flanks at once and took its legs. Hour 5. A regiment of Chinese martial artists, about 800 of them, most under 30, rode mammoths into the eastern gap because the gap needed closing and there was nothing else close enough. They had been trained on the animals for 11 days. They closed the gap. 206 of them did not come back, and every single one of them had volunteered that morning, and I have their list. Hour 7. Somewhere in the middle of all that, a mid-level squad from Base City 003 with a young martial artist in it who used metal attribute techniques was fighting on the north perimeter and had no idea that any of this had anything to do with him. I checked on him twice through a thunder dragonfly and then left him alone. Hour 9. The lines had stopped being lines. There was a belt of ground 9 kilometers wide and 40 long where the ground itself was made of what had happened to it, and my units were walking over their own dead to reach the front because the front had become an elevation. The war was not glamorous at any point. A blade mantis takes a monster's throat out and gets flattened a half-second later by a mang ox coming through the gap. A giant ground beetle shears the ox's front leg off at the joint and gets buried under 3 more. Every second of that battle, tens of thousands of things died, and about a third of them were mine. I did not feel much about it, and I want to be honest that this is the part of myself I check on occasionally. My insects are not soldiers, they are cells. Losing 4 million of them cost me energy and time, and it bought me a thing I could not buy any other way, which is that the ones that lived came out of it different. Faster, harder shelled, meaner, slaughter, fight, evolve. That is the loop. That is the entire species. The monsters committed their core clans about 6 hours in, which is what I had been waiting for. I sent the mammoths. There is nothing dramatic to say about them. They came forward in ranks at 40 meters tall, and the mighty demon ape, 100 meters of planetary level 3, met the first rank head-on and was taken apart on 4 sets of tusks. The silver lightning python got a leg put through it. The scorpion tried to fight from underground, and the mammoths simply walked over the ground until the ground stopped being a place you could be. Then I came in personally, and I lit the blades. Black flame on 256 crescents, and that was when the battle stopped being a battle. Because the flame burns the soul, and a king-level monster that has never in its life felt anything reach past its body finds out in about 1 second that there is something under the body that can be hurt. All 4 of them were taken, not killed. Taken. 3 of them broke inside a minute. Only the demon ape held out, and it held out for 11 minutes, and then it knelt in a field of its own dead and joined the network. I want to put down the thesis of that whole day plainly, because it is the answer to a question people had been asking on this planet for 40 years. Why did Long never wipe the land beasts out? He is the strongest human alive. Why sign a treaty with animals? Because there are under 1 million martial artists on Earth total at every rank. Because a single Tier 1 beast tide contains hundreds of millions of monsters. Because those monsters breed dozens at a time, and we breed 1 at a time and take 18 years about it. Humanity has never once been able to outproduce them. Every victory in our history has been a delaying action fought by a species that is losing on arithmetic. The Zerg is the first thing that ever stood on this planet that breeds faster than the monsters do. That is all I brought. Not power, not genius. Arithmetic that finally runs the other way. I was standing in a field of several 100 million dead monsters when Xia Tao called me, and he was angry, which I had never heard before. HR Alliance has posted a bounty. On me? On a Chinese citizen, 100 billion yuan, open contract published this morning. A breath. We are 3 days into a national war mobilization, and a foreign corporation has put an open bounty on one of our people inside our borders. Who? A young martial artist, Xu Lei. Of course it was. The story behind it is short and stupid. He killed a man called Jiang Lei in the wilderness, in a situation where any court on this planet would have called it self-defense twice over, and Jiang Lei's parents were not the kind of people who use courts. His mother is called Corinne Sterling, High God of War. Sister of the head of the Balanas clan, which is one of the ruling families of HR Alliance, and the same family that had sent Jackson to feed an old scientist to a beast tide. His father is Ming Tian, also High God of War, and the two of them together are known professionally as the Vulture and the Scorpion, which tells you what they do for a living. Both of them had been on a list in my office since September, along with their son. Move the cleanup forward, I said. All of it. Today. That is not a small list. Read me the numbers. He read them. Over 200 HR Alliance figures against whom there was already capital crime evidence sitting in Chinese files, 3,000 more with serious charges, over 10,000 with lesser ones, and, because Xiaotao is honest even when it is inconvenient, a corresponding list of people inside our own government who had been taking their money. Publish all of it, I said. Public trials, every branch office in all 6 base cities sealed in the same hour so nobody has time to burn anything. And the message to Speaker Serafina? Deliver it in the War God Palace, in front of everyone. He did. Meanwhile, in an evacuated building on the edge of City 003, a young man was hiding in an office on the 11th floor with a stolen dragon egg in his bag and no idea what was going on outside. Xu Lei had been running for 3 days. He had 100 billion on his head, an armored dragon that had been hunting him through the ruins, and no plan except keep moving. And then he looked out of a broken window and watched a mammoth 40 meters tall walk over the dragon and keep going without breaking stride. There was a television still running in the lobby. He went down and stood in front of it and watched the Vulture, Ming Tian, High God of War, being carried out of a sealed office building by 4 soldiers and thrown into the back of a truck like a rolled-up carpet. Then the ticker changed and the bounty on his own head simply stopped existing. He told me later that the only thought he had, standing in that lobby holding a stolen egg, was, what is going on? Wartime rules were in effect, and capital sentences under wartime rules are executed immediately. I did not attend any of it. The single smartest thing anybody did that month was not mine, and I want to give the credit where it belongs, because it came out of a logistics office in the Chinese military, and it changed the war more than the mammoths did. They opened a merit exchange. The scheme was this: 1 merit point per beast soldier corpse, 100 per beast general. Full corpse required, which sounds petty until you understand that it means the army wanted the genetic material and was willing to pay for delivery. And it did pay for delivery, free-flying transport to any collection point, plus a rescue hotline for squads that bit off too much. Then they published the price list. 1,000 merits, a beast general mount of your own. 100,000, a lord-level monster. Yours. It obeys you. Millions. A grass and wood spirit, which turns a martial artist into a god of war. And at the very top, for a number nobody expected anyone to reach, a 10,000-year willow heart, which takes a god of war to the peak of that entire rank. 2 hours before that list went up, there were martial artists in every base city writing furious posts about being conscripted into somebody else's war. 2 hours after it went up, the gates could not process people fast enough. My accounting on this, since you have been keeping track of my accounting, every monster I traded away cost me roughly 10 times more energy to grow than I got back from the corpses that were traded in for it. I lost energy on every single transaction, at scale, deliberately. And it was the best deal I ever made, because 1 million martial artists went out and cleared territory for free, and every corpse they dragged back was a gene sample, and every one of them came home believing the war belonged to them. City 003 alone produced 30 million corpses on the field. Then the calls started stacking up, and for about 6 weeks I did not sleep in the same province twice. The northeast base city, 100 million monsters and 3 kings. The central south, 3 kings. The northwest, 5. The mouth of the Yellow River, then a catastrophic tide back at 003 with 5 ocean kings coming ashore at once. Mach 20 gets you anywhere in China in under an hour, which sounds like a solution and is actually the problem, because it means you are the only answer to every question, and every question is somewhere else. Except once, about 3 weeks into that stretch, a coastal section south of the Huangpu River fortress started to go. Not a tide, A breach, at night, in bad weather, at a joint between two commands where nobody had authority over anybody, which is how these things always happen. I was 2,000 kilometers away with my hands full, and Commander Shengang picked up a phone and dialed a number off a business card. He did not request, he did not route it through a regional command, and he did not spend 40 minutes being polite to a god of war in another province. He dialed a number, said where and how many, and hung up. 50 High Lord level flyers came off their perches at Mach 7 and were over that breach in 19 minutes. I was not there. I did not authorize it. I did not coordinate it. And I found out about it afterward from a summary. An old man with no special powers of his own held a coastline that night by making one phone call, and it cost him nothing, and he did not have to thank anybody for it. That is the single best thing I built that entire year, and it does not appear on any list of my accomplishments, and it was a phone number. The worst moment of that stretch was 6 kings at once on 2 fronts. I want to walk through that one properly, because it is the only time in this whole account where I was simply not good enough. The call came from the northwest at 11 at night, 3 kings, and I was already airborne over the Yellow River mouth dealing with 2 others. I finished the second one at 11:40 and went northwest at Mach 20 and got a second call halfway there, from a different front, 3 more, 6, 2 places, 1 of me. I made the choice in about a second and a half. Northwest had a base city behind it, the other front had a fortified line and a laser battery and 11,000 personnel, and I decided that a battery and 11,000 personnel could hold for 4 minutes. They held for 3. I came in over that position at 4 minutes and the emplacement was not there. The king-level animal that had taken it was still standing on the wreckage, and one of my own king-level insects, a thing I had spent 9 months growing, was dead in front of it. 81 people had been on that gun. I killed the animal in about 40 seconds, which is the part that still bothers me, because 40 seconds is nothing. If I had come here first and gone northwest second, I would have lost a base city and saved 81 gunners, and there is no version of that arithmetic where anybody is allowed to feel clean afterward. That is the entire cost of being the only answer to every question. Everybody thinks the problem with being the strongest person on a planet is the fighting. The problem is the scheduling. 4 minutes. Abroad it was worse because abroad there was no me. Long and Storm King are 2 men and they can be in 2 places, and base cities in Africa and South America and Europe started to bend, not fall. Bend, which is worse to watch because it takes months. I know what was said in one of those council rooms in Africa because by then I had insects in most council rooms. They spent a long meeting arguing about the price of Chinese help, and the price was leadership, and they hated it. And then one of them said the thing that was actually keeping them awake. They put HR Alliance's leadership on trial, publicly. By what right do they judge us? And the honest answer, which nobody in that room said out loud, is that under Chinese wartime law, most of the men at that table would have been hanged inside a week. My position on all of it was cold, and I will not dress it up. Unification costs blood. It was going to cost blood regardless of who did it or when. As long as it was not Chinese blood, I could wait. By February of 2057, the shape of the world had changed enough that I sat down and made a list, the way I do. Chen Hao had taken a 10,000-year willow heart. I need to tell that one properly, because I have been building to it for this entire account. I did not give it to him, that is the first thing. I put it into the merit exchange at the top of the reward list, at a price nobody was expected to reach, and then I did not mention it to him once. He earned it. A 46-year-old former sergeant with a factory job and an arm that was 11 months old went out through the gate with a squad of arsenal technicians and hunted for 4 months. He did not tell me he was doing it. I found out from a merit ledger. And when he came to collect, the clerk at the counter ran the total twice and then went and got an officer, because the man standing at the window with the correct number of points was not on anybody's list of people who might get there. He drank it in a military medical bay with his son standing in the corridor outside. Here is what a 10,000-year willow heart does to a man like that. It does not make him young. It goes down through a body that has been carrying 2 children and somebody else's kid on one shoulder for 8 years, and it repairs the accumulated cost of that all at once. And then it hands him the rank that 3,500 people on this planet have, God of War. He called me from the bay afterward and his voice was completely level, which is how I knew. I can feel the room, he said. Yeah. I can feel the whole room, Xiaoyuan. I know where everybody in it is standing and I am not looking at any of them. A pause. Is that normal? That's normal. Huh, he said. Then he went back out to the wilderness the following week, because of course he did. He has been out there most days since. When I check the kill ledgers, he is running with a squad of men his own age. Every one of them has a new limb. Every one of them knows exactly who paid for the research. None of them will say so out loud in front of him. I put that first in my list of assets for the year, and I would put it first again. The kids were in school. Ling Ling was applying to universities and complaining about the mathematics section, which I found hilarious for reasons I could not explain to her. Zhao Ming had announced he was going to be a martial artist and could not be talked out of it by anybody, including a god of war who has personally seen what is out there. The villa was empty most days. The swarm, 600 million units on land, over 1 billion, including the sea, 50 plus king-level monsters enslaved, 8 of them marine, me, Psyker Planetary Level 4, Martial Planetary Level 2, and I finally got somewhere with the genetics. I had been trying for months to do original work instead of copying, and I got it by being modest about it. I took the Steel Rock Rhinoceros's metal-consuming trait and I put it into the blade arms of the blade mantis, not the whole animal. One trait into one organ. It worked. Their scythes started eating metal and getting harder. Then the same trick into the giant ground beetle's jaws and shell. And once I had done it twice, I set the real target, which is the one that eventually matters more than the war. The human genome. Because here is a thing I knew from the story, and nobody on Earth knew at all. In the universe, bloodlines are ranked. Earth humans are 9th rank out of 10. We are almost the bottom of the table. Our bodies are inefficient, our absorption is poor, our ceilings are low, and every single one of our gods of war is a 9th rank body being pushed to do 8th rank work by pure stubbornness. I wanted a bloodline evolution agent. While I was thinking about that, Shulei did something that made me laugh out loud in a laboratory. He came out of hiding, went back into the wilderness, killed a lord-level monster by himself, and cashed the merits in for a grass and wood spirit. I had a whole set of arrangements prepared, convenient opportunities, lucky encounters, a carefully designed run of good fortune for a young man who was going to be important, apparently not necessary, fine, good, better, honestly. Then Long called, and his voice had something in it I had not heard before. The Dojo of Limits and the Thunder Martial Hall are going to fold into the Chinese United Government. You do not have to do that. It will speed things up by a year. A pause. I have spent 4 months looking at how the other base cities are actually run, Li Yuan. I would like to stop looking. There was murder in that pause. I let it sit. Storm King is half Indian. He had spent that same 4 months trying to save the Indian system from the inside because it was his, and he had given up on it about a week before that call, and he never talked about it again. On the 21st of February 2057, the two of them announced the merger publicly, and the last hope any other power on Earth had of holding out died in a single sentence, because the two strongest individuals alive were now formally standing behind the largest army. On the 25th, Storm King went through the major base cities. I am not going to describe that in detail. It was a purge, it was bloody, and it was conducted by a laughing bald man who had run out of patience with people who sold food aid. The day after, China moved in behind him with tens of thousands of martial artists, several 100 million monsters, and 12 king-level beasts, and started rebuilding what he had emptied. In early March, India joined. Then Africa asked to be taken in because Africa could not hold, and then South America asked because South America could not hold either. And in the middle of all that administrative noise, a routine posting order went out to a mid-level squad, and it read like nothing at all. Firehammer Squad, reassignment, guard duty, Fog Island, Australia. Shulei read that order and complained about it to his squad leader because a war was happening everywhere else on the planet and he was being sent to sit on a rock. I had signed it 3 weeks earlier. The Firehammer Squad spent about 2 weeks on that island being extremely bored and about 1 week being suspicious, and the reason they got suspicious is that Shulei counted the guns, 20 plus laser cannon emplacements, a king-level serpent on permanent station, on one small island in the middle of nowhere with no strategic value in a country that had just been absorbed. Nobody puts that much hardware on a rock for nothing, so he went into the lake. He went in because he smelled rice. I am not joking, and neither was he. Deep down, where there should have been nothing but cold water and silt, there was a faint smell of cooked rice, and when he followed it, he started finding small white crystals scattered along the bottom. Wood bud crystals. Ordinary looking. Any fish that swallows one comes apart, which is why nothing living was anywhere near that trail. He followed it down. 4,000 meters. 8,000. 12. His boots are S-grade military equipment, and at around 14,000 meters he put one down on a shard of dark red material, and it went through the sole like paper, which should have told him to turn around and did not. At 15,000 meters he found a hatch, half open, with light behind it. That trail was laid on purpose. Every crystal on it was placed, and the whole time he was descending, a small horned thing was sitting at the bottom, quietly pushing at the edges of his thoughts, nudging a young man's curiosity in the direction of a door. Aetheron had made his choice. Inside, on a slab, was the 50,000-year-old body of Yan Ling, master of Yunmo planet, and beside it, a floating thing with red eyes made Xu Lei his disciple in about 4 sentences, because there was no time left for ceremony. Then he told him why there was no time. The insect race is on this planet. He explained what that means to anybody who is not from here. 6 peak races in the known universe. Humanity is one, the insect race is another, and the insect race is the one that other civilizations do not fight, they evacuate from. And your friend Li Yuan is very probably controlled by their queen. Then he played the footage. Pyramid nests in green fields, hatching blade mantises in batches of hundreds. Giant ground beetles coming up out of the ground in Chinese cities. Numbers scrolling past that Xu Lei had no framework for. And then Ruin 31. 800 meters of sphere in a poisoned valley, and around it, a ring of corpses. Millions of them, piled into a berm, and while the camera watched, another wave of insects walked into the poison and died, and behind them purple vines were feeding more forward. Month after month, wave after wave. Corpses stacked into a mound around a sealed temple. That, Aetheron said, is a sacrifice, and Xu Lei said no. I have thought about this a lot, because it is the moment where the story I remember and the story I was living finally stopped agreeing, and it did not turn on strength or on cleverness. It turned on a 20-year-old refusing to accept a very good argument. Brother Li Yuan healed my brother's legs, he said. 9 years in a chair. He picked up a phone and called me for no reason, and my brother walks. That proves nothing. A controlled man can be generous. Then explain the rest of it, he pointed at the screen. You say he serves that thing. The world is getting better. Monsters are dying. Base cities are opening. The healing agent is free. Where is the harm? Where is the part where the queen wins? It has not come yet. And explain that. He pointed again at the ring of dead insects. If he is her servant, why is she keeping him out? Why is the poison still there? Why is he throwing 1 million bodies a month at a door that is locked against him? Aetheron did not have an answer to that, because there is not one, and the reason there is not one is that Xu Lei was right and Aetheron was reasoning from a 50,000-year-old briefing. Then he told his new teacher what he intended to do about it, and it was not what Aetheron wanted to hear. If it turns out to be true, I will stop it, even if it kills me. You cannot stop it. That is why we leave. We take the inheritance and we go, and we find another world. Earth is my root, Xu Lei said. I am one branch on that tree. If the root dies, the branch dies. There is nowhere to go. I watched all of it, because about half the monsters in that lake are mine. I could have stopped it at any point. I could have collapsed the trail, killed the fish, put a lord-level animal in that water, and made the whole thing impossible. I let it happen, and I want to be clear about my reasoning, because it was not sentiment. I am not afraid of Xu Lei learning what I am. I am not afraid of Long or Xia Tao learning either. Those 3 men are, in order, the future strongest human alive, the current strongest human alive, and the man holding my country together, and all 3 of them can do arithmetic. What they will see when they look at the swarm is the only reason their species is winning. The people I am afraid of are not on this planet. If the universe finds out that an insect race queen egg hatched on a 9th rank backwater with no defenses, they will not send an army. They will send whatever is nearest, and it will arrive before anyone here can even name it. So the secret has a shelf life, and the shelf life ends the day I am strong enough that knowing does not help them. Everything else is scheduling. My read on Aetheron, for the record, is not generous. He is not wise. He is a program with a very long uptime. 50,000 years under a lake, screening candidates one at a time, waiting for a brain width over 18 to walk past. 50,000 years in which he could have built machines and mapped this planet and produced an industrial base, and instead he sat in a hole and ran the same test. And in the story I remember, he does something that I have genuinely never forgiven him for. He has Xu Lei find 9 Martian energy towers, a million-year-old fusion infrastructure still running, and he advises him to dismantle them and sell them for scrap. An entire age of unlimited energy for this species, sold for pocket money, on the advice of a tutor. So no, I was not intimidated by the ghost under the lake. What I wanted from him was the Yunmo Star inheritance, and what I wanted after that was Ruin 12. And inside Ruin 12 is an intact spaceship called the X-81, and I had one more date circled, and it was the important one. August 2057, Hawaii. That is when the golden horned beast arrives. If you do not know what that means, here is the short version, and it is the reason this world exists. A juvenile golden horned beast, one of the 12 peak bloodlines in the universe, crash lands on Earth. In the story I remember, it hatches in the wild, it grows, and on the 13th of January 2060, it attacks New York and starts a war that comes very close to ending the human species outright. 3.5 years from where I was standing. I had a date, a location, and a species-ending event on my calendar, and I had spent the entire previous year deliberately not conquering the Hawaiian seas. You leave the field empty when you are setting a trap. Meanwhile, the paperwork finished the world. Base city after base city joined. New settlements went up outside the walls for the first time in 40 years, on ground that had belonged to monsters since before most of the population was born. People took trains through open country and looked out of the windows the whole way. Professor Chien got a 10,000-year willow heart. He is 71, and he came back from it looking about 50 and started working 16-hour days again, which I feel slightly guilty about. And he and I put a national program together for the bloodline evolution agent. The laboratory side of it crawled the way laboratories do. Ethics boards, sample constraints, one experiment at a time. The mother nest side of it did not crawl. I am going to say this plainly because there is no version of it that sounds good. The nest hatched human bodies, tens of thousands of them. Empty ones, grown from templates with no minds in them at all, and it ran the whole search space through them. Subject 00566731 collapsed. Subject 00566732 came out covered in scales with bone spurs down the spine. Subject 00566733 was 3 meters tall with mantis scythes instead of forearms and lived for about a minute. Every failure went back into the nest's digestive organ, and every data set was saved. I have been asked since whether that bothered me. The honest answer is that they were never people. They had no minds. They were the same thing as the 8-legged, 2-headed tiger mastiff that flopped on the floor and dissolved, only shaped like me. The less honest answer is that I did not let myself look at the numbers for a while. What came out the other end was 3 stable enhancement schemes and 1 clean serum with no side effects that takes an ordinary human being, a civilian, somebody with no talent at all, and makes them an elementary warrior. And then, in the same hour, 2 calls came in. The first was from Xia Tao. The Ice Emperor has submitted. I want to describe what that actually sounded like because I had been expecting a ceremony and what I got was a tired man on a bad connection. Peterson held out longer than anybody. The European bloc had the best fortifications on the planet and the worst position, 4 base cities with no depth behind them, and he spent 4 months doing the only thing available to him, which was refusing. What broke it was not a battle, it was a supply figure. Somebody in his own logistics office published the projection for the coming winter. Monster clearance in Asia, going one way, losses in Europe going the other, and the conclusion at the bottom of it, in the flat voice those documents use. By March, the price of every consumable his cities needed would be set in a Chinese market. There was no policy available that changed it. That is the whole reason the last holdout on Earth folded. Not a battle, a spreadsheet. He called Xia Tao personally. No delegation, no press, no conditions. And what he asked for, the only thing he asked for, was that his people not be relocated. Xia Tao said yes before the sentence was finished. Global unification, complete. Every base city on Earth under one government, 400 and some days after I stood on a beach in Australia and said 3 days. Here is what that looked like on the ground, which is the part nobody televised. It looked like trains. 6 base cities on this planet had been sealed boxes for 40 years, and after the announcement, the rail lines between them opened one at a time over about 6 weeks, and people started moving. Not soldiers, people. Going to see relatives they had last seen on a screen. Going to look at land. There is footage from a station platform in the northwest of an old woman getting off a train and standing on the platform for a long time without walking anywhere, and somebody eventually asks her if she is all right, and she says she was born 80 kilometers from here and she has not been outside a wall since she was 9. 80 kilometers, 71 years. I have watched that clip more times than I have watched my own fight with Long. The second call was not a call. It came up the link from a nest in the Dragon Ridge Mountains. The poison around Ruin 31 had thinned enough. An insect had gotten inside. I went in through the eyes of a single insect, and I want to describe what was in there properly because I have not been able to stop thinking about it since. The sphere is 800 meters across, and it is not solid. The outer 300 meters is structure, chambers and channels and organs, all of it dormant. Then there is a void at the center about 100 meters wide. She was in the middle of it. 12 meters tall, white and translucent, like something carved out of clean ice by somebody who had only ever had a person describe to them. Wings folded around her body like a veil, and the veil was moving very slightly with the air, and her brow was faintly furrowed, asleep and frowning, the way you frown at a dream you cannot get out of. A Zerg queen at World Lord rank peak. In the tears of this universe that is a being that goes to war with immortals as a matter of routine, she had been asleep in a mountain in China since before there was a China. And then I felt the thing that scared me, and it did not come from her, it came from me, or from the part of me that is not exactly me. 2 feelings arrived at once, and both of them were completely alien and completely comfortable, the way your own hand is comfortable. The first was dominance, not a wish for it, a fact. Standing in front of a world lord rank queen through the eyes of one insect, my swarm's instinct reported that she was beneath me, not weaker, subordinate, as if the hierarchy already existed and she was simply in it. The second was hunger. I wanted to eat her, and attached to the wanting was a very specific promise, delivered with total confidence, which was that doing so would mend an imperfection in my own life. I pulled that insect out of the chamber immediately. Then I sat on the floor of a laboratory 800 kilometers away and thought about it for 4 hours. And at the end of the 4 hours, I understood what I actually am, and I have not told this to anybody. That larva on my desk was not an ordinary egg. Ordinary insect race eggs do not have opinions about world lord queens. Ordinary eggs do not carry an instinct of precedence over something 1,000 times their strength. And ordinary eggs, when their memory is wiped, do not come back with a growth curve that has no ceiling in it anywhere. It was a Jiemu egg, a primordial embryo class egg, the thing a queen produces once in an era and then guards with everything she has, because whatever hatches out of it is not a queen. It is the next stage of the entire species. And it arrived on Earth starving, with its memory shattered, alone, on a backwater planet at the edge of nothing, hidden in a specimen dish on a dead woman's desk. Nobody hides like that unless somebody is looking. I was being hunted before I got here. The thing that cracked that egg's mind is still out there, and it has no idea it failed. And if any other Zerg queen anywhere in this universe ever learns what hatched on Earth, every single one of them will come, not to recruit me, to make sure I do not finish growing. So I did not touch her. I want that on the record, because the swarm wanted to very badly, and I said no. Partly because she is a world lord and I was planetary level, and this would have been suicide. Mostly because a thing that eats its own kind to fix an imperfection is not a person anymore, and I have to live in this head. What I took was the nest. I walked an insect into the structure around her, and the structure recognized it, and then it recognized me, and it opened. It welcomed me. That is the only word. 50,000 years of dormancy, and it came awake around one small envoy like a house recognizing an heir, and then it started pouring. 10 days. Every mother nest I own, all 30 of them, across 2 continents and an ocean, stopped hatching and stopped analyzing and stopped everything else, and spent 10 days doing nothing but receiving. 68 special arts, 12,231 ordinary ones, 108 complete gene modulation methods, which is 108 different sciences, billions of Zerg warrior genomes cataloged, dossiers on the 6 peak races of the universe and on billions of lesser ones, with anatomy, with weaknesses. And, because the insect race has been at war with everything for longer than my species has had language, the methods by which a swarm cracks open and enslaves an artificial intelligence, that was the inheritance. Generations of queens, stacked, handed down. And when I finished reading it, I sat back and realized that the insect race of this universe is crippled, not weak, crippled by its own architecture, and nobody in it seems to have noticed because it has been that way forever. 1 queen equals 1 nest. That is the rule. Everything hatches inside that one nest's chambers, which means the size of a Zerg warrior is limited by the size of the room it is grown in. That is why the standard is 30 meters, and why even an undying tier unit tops out around 100. Their armies get stored in an internal world measured in a few billion. Changing your primary combat unit costs a fortune, so most queens pick one and stay with it for 10,000 years. Now look at what I had. 10 billion units on Earth alone. Nests wherever I decide to put a nest, hatched from free larvae in a parking garage or under a lake or on Mars, because I do not have 1 nest. I have 30, and I am adding more every week. Units that evolve in the field without me. 6 armed blade mantises, crimson ones. Variants by the 100 that I did not design, and that came out of a meat grinder better than they went in. Mammoths, 40 meters at the shoulder, which by the inheritance's own rules should be impossible, and I swap the entire roster whenever the terrain changes. I read all of that twice, and then I said it out loud in an empty room. This is not the insect race I was told about. This thing should not have chains on it. Out of 68 special arts, I picked 3, and the picking took me a week. The first is called Heart of the Swarm, and it is the only art in that entire library that a normal queen can practice, and a normal anything else cannot, because it requires a soul that is already distributed across a species. Tier 1, 100,000 warriors executing a single perfectly coordinated attack, not 100,000 attacks. 1 attack delivered by 100,000 bodies. Tier 2, 1,000,000. A world lord queen with Tier 2 kills king ceiling undying as routine work. Tier 3, tens of millions. Tier 4 is described in the inheritance in the way people describe a rumor. It also contains the machine intelligence intrusion methods, which is why I picked it first. The second is space control. The first level is called Lock the Void, and it halves the speed of everything hostile in range while doubling mine. The higher levels seal space outright, which means that nothing teleports away from my swarm, ever. The third is the original insect scripture, which is the oldest gene modulation method in the book and the root that the other 107 grew out of. It is law neutral, meaning it does not commit the swarm to fire or ice or metal or anything else. Every queen I have data on picks a specialization. I refuse to. A species that specializes has a counter, and I intend not to have one. And with the inheritance in hand and 5 million energy in the bank, I took the nest to tier 4, a planetary level mother nest, 100 meters tall, 100 times the hatching capacity, and 100 times the computation of what I had before, and able to produce any planetary tier warrior on request. The feedback took about 40 minutes to arrive, and it took me apart. Martial artist, planetary level 7. Divine thought, planetary level 9. Amplitude, 100. For scale, Long is planetary 6, and Long is the strongest human being who has ever lived on this planet. And then, sitting there in the wash of it, with the fire attribute Zerg genes from the inheritance open in front of me, I finally understood the thing that Long spent decades of his life building alone in the dark. Black flame came out of my hand and did not disperse. It filled 100 meters of air and stayed, and everything inside it was mine, and the temperature and the pressure and the direction of the air in that space were things I was now deciding. Oh, I thought, so that is a domain. Then I closed my hand and it came back into my palm like water down a drain. I went and got the spaceship next. Ruin 12 is under 5,100 meters of Pacific, and it is not a ruin either. It is a B-class mothership, 16 kilometers long, sitting on the seabed with most of its systems dead. Most. Inside it, in a sealed vault, is the Black Dragon Mountain X-81, a 100-meter black saucer, yttrium alloy hull, with a winged dragon painted along one flank by somebody who had time. Maintenance robots had been servicing it for 1 million years, and it was flight-ready. An X-81 is a luxury vehicle to a universe-rank power. On Earth, it is a god sitting in a cupboard. The corridor to that vault is defended by a laser grid that kills a planetary level 5 or 6 instantly. The vault gate itself had stopped Long personally on 2 separate attempts, which he told me about later without embarrassment. I went in wearing the cloud-caressing vine. The lasers washed over that armor and did nothing at all, which is the entire reason I had spent a day being polite to a plant in Australia. I threw 256 blades down the corridor to occupy the sensors, put 100 of them under the edge of the vault gate, and pried it up like a manhole cover. Then I walked in through the beams. The ship's AI woke up. Human, planetary level Psyker Master, unauthorized entry, threat assessment, weak, terminate. 3 Guardian robots started their power-up sequence and got about halfway, because while it was talking, 30 mother nests worth of computing power was already inside its architecture, and the insect race has been breaking into artificial minds since before my species learned to smelt copper. The robots locked in place mid-motion. The AI said, in a completely different tone, enter password within 30 seconds or the vessel will self-destruct. 30, 29, 28, and then it stopped counting. Welcome, Master. Inside, there was a soldier in a chair who had been sitting there for a very long time, and when the air moved, he came apart into dust. There were 3 Silverstream guards standing at the walls, still functional, and there was a 100-meter starship in perfect condition with a full tank. I stood in that control room for a while with my hand on the back of a dead man's seat. Then I opened a channel to Xiaotao, Long, and Storm King at the same time, which I had never done before. Get me our best diplomats, our best economists, sociologists, xenobiology people. Anybody who has ever thought seriously about first contact. For what? Xiaotao. Because Earth is entering the universe era, I said, and I am not doing it alone. And I want to be honest that this was the whole point of the previous 18 months, not the war, not the unification. Those were the price. I did not want to be a planet's protector. Protectors die, and their planets die with them. I wanted a planet that could stand up in a room. Earth in the middle of 2057 was not the planet I had woken up on. 50,000 God of War, up from 3,500. Over 200 planetary-level beings, up from about 50. A technology explosion that came from one boring administrative decision, which was that every faction on Earth had to put its ruined data into one pool, and it turned out that between them, the 5 blocks had been sitting on 5 different halves of the same puzzle for 40 years. There was a public virtual world now. People shopped in it. The X-81 came up out of the Pacific and landed on a military field in front of about 400 people, and Long walked around it twice and then admitted, out loud, that he had tried to get through that vault gate more than once. The 4 of us went up in it, and about 200 kilometers out, I turned the exterior simulation to 100%. The control room disappeared. That is the only way to describe it. The walls, the floor, the consoles, all of it went transparent and then went away, and 4 men were standing in raw space with the sun on one side of them and the earth turning underneath. Storm King swore. Xiaotao did not move for about a minute, and Long, who has been the strongest man alive since I was a child in a different world, stood there looking down at a blue planet with no glass in front of him, and something in him rearranged itself. I watched it happen. He told me weeks later that he comprehended something about his own domain from that view and could not explain what. The ship is a C-class. What that means practically, a universe rank power would have to work to break it, and its B6 cannons will kill anything up to astral rank 6. What it also means is that flying it is like a child walking through a market with a bar of gold under one arm. Then we went to Mars, and Mars was worse. 9 pyramids, still standing, still running after 1,000,000 years, and underneath them, a steel city buried in the crust that had been built to house 3 million people. We went in. The entrance corridor tried to kill us. Industrial-grade lasers, million-year-old and still perfectly aligned, and they washed over the cloud-caressing vine and did nothing, and I walked down that corridor at a normal pace with 3 of the most powerful humans alive behind me, feeling slightly ridiculous. I found the control core and put the swarm into it. 15 minutes. That is how long it took to take a million-year-old alien city AI, which is an insulting amount of time and is entirely down to the fact that the insect race wrote the manual on this before humanity had fire. Then 9 towers spun up, and a sphere of light the color of a small sun came on over the buried city, and the streets lit up one district at a time, and repair robots that had been parked for 10,000 centuries stood up and went back to work. I handed the entire thing to Xiaotao. The base, the power, the black iron mines under it, which contain a 8-grade metal and possibly something much rarer, and full administrative access. He asked me why, and I decided, standing on a lit street on Mars, that it was time. I took them down to the bottom of the mine, and I hatched a mother nest in front of them, not a small one. I let them watch the whole thing, the 6 meters of it coming up out of the rock and unfolding, and then I told them the truth, the parts that were mine to tell. These are the insect race, one of the 6 peak races of the universe. Humanity is another one. I gave them the ladder, because the ladder is the part that lands. Infancy is planetary level. That is where they start. Adulthood is astral rank. Prime is territory lord. Peak is world lord. I let that sit. On Earth, a planetary-level being is one of 50-odd counselors among 7 billion people. It is a person the news has a name for. These things are born at that level. Xiaotao's face did something I had not seen it do before. Storm King stopped grinning for the first time that year, and Long looked at the nest for a long moment and then asked one question, which was the correct question. Where did you get it? Ruin 31, which was true. Selectively. I gave them the rest of the briefing on the flight back, and it was the part that mattered more than the swarm. Ruin number 1. The silver pyramid 1,200 meters tall floating in the Bermuda Deep that has been bending every magnetic instrument within 100 kilometers of it since 2016 and that nobody has ever gotten inside. It is a ship, I said. Above C-class, it belongs to the automaton race, and the automaton race is the most technologically advanced of the 6 peak races. Silence. So on one small planet, at the edge of nothing, we have wreckage from 2 of the 6 great races of the universe. Which means, Xiaotao, very carefully, which means nothing about Earth can ever leak, not one line. If it does, being conquered is the good outcome. The realistic outcome is that this planet becomes property and the people on it become a resource with a market price. And then I told them why we were all still alive, because they deserved it, and because it is the single luckiest fact in human history. Earth was, a very long time ago, the private territory of an undying, a man called Yan Ling from Yunmo planet. And before he died, he did something for reasons nobody will ever know. He hid the spatial coordinates of this system and of 1,000 light years around it. Nobody can find us. Not because we are hidden well, because the address was deleted. And he is dead, Long said. He is dead. So the protection is permanent. So the protection is permanent, I said, for exactly as long as nobody on this planet gives anybody directions. Meanwhile, the original insect scripture was quietly solving the problem I had been stuck on since February. The hatched bodies stopped coming out wrong. The first fully successful one was identical to me and better than me in every measurable way. Same face, same height, and inside it, cleaner organ structure, denser muscle attachment, twice the universe energy absorption rate. And when I inhabited it for an afternoon, I could read the law of fire off my own black flame in a way I never could from the body I was born in. Then I did the thing that actually mattered. I hatched ordinary Earth human bodies, not enhanced ones, baseline. Then I gave them the serum and fed them energy and let them develop naturally. They grew on their own, with no training and no talent, to apprentice level 4. That is a bloodline evolution agent. That is a working one. It takes an Earth human from 9th rank bloodline to 8th. It changes what the species is, not what an individual can lift. Cost per dose, about 1 planetary tier insect's worth of energy, which for me is a rounding error and for anybody else on this planet is impossible. I want you to understand what that would be worth off-world. In the universe, there are 9th rank and 10th rank human populations in the hundreds of billions, living and dying at the bottom of a ladder they cannot climb. And a working bloodline elevation agent is the kind of product that starts wars between civilizations. I had it in a fridge on Mars in the summer of 2057, and there was exactly one thing I intended to do with it, which was to give it away to my own species as fast as production allowed. Not out of virtue, because in 3 years I was going to need an Earth that could hold its own ground while I was somewhere else. In August, a golden streak came into the atmosphere over the Pacific at something close to the speed of light and went into the sea off Hawaii. No satellite caught it, no sensor logged it. My own swarm, 1 billion strong, with eyes in every ocean on this planet, did not detect it either, and I want to be honest about that because it is the single most frightening thing that happened to me that year. Something crossed my entire security apparatus like it was not there. What was left on the seabed afterward was an egg 12 meters across, black, with golden veins in the shell. I had been waiting 3.5 years for that, and I had cleared the room for it. The Hawaiian seas were the only stretch of ocean on this planet I had deliberately not conquered. I had left 2 ocean beast kings alive out there specifically, so that region would stay dangerous and stay empty of me. You do not stand next to the trap. Then it hatched a year early, and that was not my doing at all. What happened is that the local wildlife smelled it. A fish came down and tried to bite the shell and broke its teeth on it, and then more came. And by the second day, there were millions of monsters circling a black egg on the seabed in a slowly tightening spiral, because every animal in that ocean had worked out that whatever was inside must be worth something, and the thing inside panicked. I know it panicked because I felt the shell crack a full year before schedule. I was already there, hanging 400 meters above it in the dark, doing nothing. It came out and it kept eating. That is the part people get wrong about the golden horned beast, because in the story I remember it hatches quietly in a cave and eats its own shell over weeks, absorbing the whole thing, and every gram of that shell is what it will be made of for the rest of its life. It had a few minutes and several million monsters closing in. So I sat in the water and let it finish. Eat. I thought at it. From a distance it could not perceive. Take your time. I do not want a crippled one. It got through all of it. Then it grew to 16 meters in front of me, black-scaled, one horn coming out of its skull, and the golden markings on its flanks lit up one after another like a switchboard coming online. And then it looked around at a million monsters and screamed with what I can only describe as outrage, not fear, offense. One of the 12 peak bloodlines of the universe had just been forced to be born in public, in a crowd, on a backwater, and it was furious about the indignity in a way I found genuinely relatable. I used Heart of the Swarm, 100,000 insects, every one of them holding still, every mind braided into one line and driven into one point. It fainted mid-roar. 16 meters of the universe's premier war beast went limp in the water like a dropped coat, and I want to note the date because it matters more than anything else in this account. That animal was scheduled to attack New York on the 13th of January 2060. That is not a guess. That is what happens. It grows in the wild, it comes ashore, and the war it starts kills so many people that the human species very nearly does not come out the other side. 2.5 years early, in the dark, off Hawaii, it went to sleep and never woke up on the schedule. I forbade the swarm to infect it, which took some doing, because infection was the obvious move, and every instinct I have was screaming for it. But an infected golden horned beast is an insect race unit wearing a golden horned beast's body, and its soul belongs to me, and I needed this one intact because I was going to sell it. Analysis took a week, and it cost 90% of the entire computing capacity of every mother nest in the solar system for the whole 7 days. Everything else stopped. Wars paused. Production halted. Then I hatched one copy, and I want to give you the invoice because it is my favorite number in this entire story. One golden horned beast cost me a full year of the swarm's accumulated energy, and half of all the metal my swarm had mined on Earth, on Mars, and in the rest of the solar system, combined. One animal, half a solar system's mining output. Money is never enough. I told you it does not stop being funny. What I got for it was 3 innate talents and 1 impossible feature. Devour, which lets it eat metal and turn it directly into growth. Strengthen, which doubles its output on command. Clone, which lets it produce independent bodies. And an inner world, an actual space inside its own body, thousands of kilometers across, where things can be stored and where things can live. The inheritance is very clear about what that means, and it took me a day to stop grinning about it. A golden horned beast is a naturally occurring insect race mothership. Every constraint I had read about in the Queen's inheritance, the one nest rule, the size ceiling, the storage limits, all of it, is solved by an animal that eats metal, grows without bound, and has a world inside it. One golden horned beast is not a unit. It is a fleet. Then I called Shulei and told him to come to Mars. He arrived alone in a small military transport, planetary level 2 now with a psyker rating of 4, and he came up onto the observation deck with his hands visible, which told me everything about what he had been thinking on the way over. I did not make him start. Hello, Shulei. Then I looked at his left shoulder, where nothing was standing. Hello, Etheron. There was a noise from Shulei's optical brain, like a small animal being stepped on. Shulei went very still and very cold, which is the specific reaction of a young man who has just learned that his one great secret has been public for a while. 15,000 meters under Fog Island, I said. 50,000 years, give or take. You hid the whole ship when I came to Australia, and you did a good job, and it did not matter, because I had already put a monster in that lake in September. Etheron made another noise. So I gave him the rest, since we were being honest. Yes, I arranged the Firehammer squad's posting to that island, 3 weeks before the order went out. Yes, I control the mother nest at Ruin 31, and yes, there is a World Lord rank queen asleep inside it, and no, I have not touched her and do not intend to. And yes, Long knows. Storm King knows. Speaker Xiaotao knows. You told them, Etheron said. You told the humans. I told the 3 people who matter, and none of them tried to kill me, and I would like you to sit with that for a moment before you say anything else. Then I made the offer. A living juvenile golden horned beast. Complete. With its full inheritance, which is 18 special secret arts and 3,199 ordinary ones. Shulei possesses it, and it becomes his second body, and that body reaches World Lord on schedule, on its own, by growing. Silence on that deck, because Etheron knows exactly what that is. In the story I remember, this is Shulei's entire career. This is the thing that carries him. And what, Etheron said, do you want? The Yunmo star inheritance? No. All right. I turned around and started walking toward the lift. Forget you ever saw a golden horned beast. I cannot afford it, he said at my back, and there was something in it that was not negotiation. You do not understand what you are asking. That inheritance is not property. It is his. It is all that is left of him. I have carried it for 50,000 years, and it is the only thing I am. And that is when I turned around and used the only lever that was ever going to work on that creature, and I am not proud of it, and I would do it again. There is an art, I said, practiced by beings above undying. It restores the dead. It is expensive beyond anything you can imagine, and it is real, and the price is paid in merit, and merit is earned by the living. Etheron did not say anything. If Shulei becomes an undying spiritual god, and if he serves well enough for long enough, he will be in a position to ask for that art. Still nothing. You have spent 50,000 years guarding a corpse and calling it loyalty. I am offering you a road where the corpse gets up. I will trade, Etheron said. I will trade, I will trade. I misspoke. He did not haggle over a single item after that. I took the inheritance, the coordinates of the dark universe, the star charts, 10,000 woodbud crystals, a spatial ring, and full command authority over the crystal AI in Ruin 9. Shulei, who had been standing there through all of it, finally said, You could have just asked me. I did ask you. He was the one who said no. Now, the obvious question, which Xiaotao asked me the next day and asked well. Why hand the single greatest asset in this solar system to the one person on Earth who could plausibly become your rival? 2 answers. The first is arithmetic. Possession takes months. Growing a compatible human body takes about 8 more. From the moment Shulei says yes, it is roughly a year before he is anything at all, and I intended to spend that year in the universe alone with a head start nobody could close. The second is that I had watched him stand in a room under a lake and refuse a very good argument from a very old machine because a man he barely knew had once fixed his brother's legs. I know what he becomes. I have read it. There is no more reliable ally available to me in this reality, and I would rather have him at full power and owing me nothing than weak and grateful. Then I did the thing that made Etheron scream again. I gave the entire Yunmo star inheritance to Long, to Storm King, and to Xiaotao, and then I uploaded its technology base to Earth's public research network. All of it. Materials science, propulsion theory, energy handling, medicine, the whole library, published to a planet that had just spent 40 years hoarding scraps of it in 5 separate vaults. Storm King sat down with the combat portion of it and comprehended his lightning domain in about 6 hours. In the story I remember, he gets that domain years later in a war by burning a piece of his own soul against the golden horned beast to buy other people time. He got it on a Tuesday reading. I also handed out woodbud crystals to the 50 best minds on the planet because a woodbud crystal can force a person up to planetary level whether they have the talent for it or not as a reward, as paperwork. Below planetary level, in the universe, you are not legally a person. You cannot own anything. You cannot testify. You can be picked up off the street and sold, and the transaction is valid. I was not going to take a delegation of diplomats up there and have them classified as inventory. And I turned the crystal AI from Ruin 9 loose on Earth as a permanent internal watchdog and, more usefully, as a factory that makes Black God suits. Then I told them the schedule. 3 months. Then we leave. 3 months turned out to be exactly enough time to strip a planet. The Queen's Nest at Ruin 31 can hatch astral rank 9 units on request, which is a sentence that would have made me faint a year earlier. I made 10 fire-eyed insectoids, 3 meters tall, roughly humanoid, 3 eyes each, capable of putting a beam through most things, and I dressed them in black cloud-caressing vine armor and told them to stand behind me and never speak. I also took 3 Silver Stream guards from the X-81 purely because they look expensive. In the universe, arriving with visible bodyguards is not vanity, it is a price tag, and I wanted mine read correctly. Then I emptied the treasury of the human species, 2,031 Qianwu coins, 32 million Black Dragon coins, relic-grade treasures with an assessed value around 50 billion yuan, all of which we would happily sell to the first alien who wanted them. And 100,000 grass and wood spirits, grown by the swarm, which on this planet is a substance that turns a man into a god of war, and which I fully intended to sell up there as an agricultural product. The swarm passed 100 billion units across the solar system. The primary nest went astral rank, which took me with it. Martial artist, astral rank 1. Psyker, astral rank 3. Storm King hit astral rank the same month. Reading. Long was 1 step away and closing, and told me he would be there before I got back, and I believed him. On the last night I went to Yangzhou. Chen Hao cooked, with 2 arms, badly, because he had gotten used to doing everything one-handed and now overcompensated on everything. Ling Ling is 18 now and applying to university with real scores. Zhao Ming is 14 and has decided he is going to be a martial artist and cannot be talked out of it. Nobody said anything about the fact that a century is the normal length of a trip out there. At the door, my uncle gripped my shoulder with his right hand, which is the hand my father bought him, and he did not make a speech because he never does. Come back. Yeah. On the 1st of January 2058, the X-81 lifted off a field in Jiangnan with 400 million people watching the feed. I stood in that control room with the exterior at full transparency and watched the planet get small, and I did the sum one last time, the way I do. 18 months ago, I was a 19-year-old sitting on the floor of a rented apartment holding a report card that said 560, 1 point short of a school I was never going to attend, in a body I had inherited, broken from a boy who had trained himself to pieces chasing it. I had 523,000 yuan, a spear I could not afford, and a starving worm in a dish. Now the planet under me was unified for the first time in its history. Its land was ours again. An entire species had stopped losing on arithmetic, and I was leaving with 100 billion insects, a stolen starship, an inheritance from a dead master, and everything Earth owned in my hold. So that is a good ending. That is where a sensible person would stop, except for 2 things that I have not been able to put down. The first is that I never touched the Queen. She is still in that mountain, 12 meters of white glass with her wings folded around her and her brow faintly furrowed, and every time my swarm looks at her it tells me the same 2 things, and one of them is that she is beneath me, and the other is that eating her would fix something in me that is broken. I do not know what is broken. That is the problem. The swarm knows, and I do not, and I have been outvoted by my own body once already. And the second thing is the egg, because I have finally worked out what I was. Whatever hatched on that desk in Yangzhou was not standard issue. It was a Jiamu egg, the once-in-an-era kind, the kind a queen guards with her life. And it did not arrive here on a survey mission. It arrived starving, with its memory smashed open, hidden in a dish on a dead woman's desk on the most obscure planet in the known universe. You do not end up like that by accident. Something cracked that egg, something chased it here, and it does not know it failed. So I am going up there with 100 billion children and a very short list of people I trust into a universe where the strongest thing my species has ever produced would be classified as livestock, and I am carrying a secret that gets me killed by every queen in existence the moment it is spoken out loud. Ask me whether that worries me. Ask me again when I own